Good afternoon and welcome members of the public, officers and members of the committee to South Kesteven District Council Planning Committee on the 8th of May 2025 and the time is 1 p.m. I'm Councillor Charmaine Morgan, the Chair of Planning, and I will be chairing this meeting today, and my Vice Chair, Councillor Penny Milnes, is here to able assist me. I just need to run through some housekeeping items first. So I'm not aware of any fire drill taking place today, so if the alarm does go, then please follow the instructions provided by our fire warden designated Amy Pride. Please vacate the building by the nearest fire exit or the central stairwell, and for information, that is actually where the nearest fire exit is. A meeting place is outside at the front on St. Peter's Hill Green. Please can you ensure that you have turned your mobile phones off or they are switched on to silence. Thank you. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded and is also being live streamed via the public on South Kesteven website. Can you please ensure your microphones are turned off when you're not speaking? And please also ensure you do not place your mobile phones near a microphone to avoid any feedback. For members of the public, if any of you do need a drink, we do have a water fountain in the corner. You're welcome to help yourselves. And we also have toilets just outside the door on the right-hand side, should anybody need to use them. We have with us today our officers, Assistant Director of Planning and Growth, Emma Whittaker, Development Manager, Phil Jordan, Principal Development Manager, Management Planner, Adam Murray, and we have Anicia Ross-Gilmore, a Planning Officer. From Legal Services, welcome, we have Paul Weeks. Thank you, Paul. And from Democratic Services, and doubling up as our fire warden, is Amy Pride. Thank you, Amy. Before we start our meeting today, we are very mindful that this is a very special day. It's the 80th anniversary of the victory in Europe, one of the first steps marking the end of World War II. Because this occasion has coincided with our planning committee, I would like to take this opportunity to reflect on the importance of today to our district and to our country before we start our formal agenda. During World War II, Grantham served as a crucial hub for military operations, including air training, manufacturing and supporting airborne assaults. The town housed RAF Grantham, an important training station for bomber crews, and played a vital role in the planning and execution of D-Day and Operation Market Garden. The HQ Bomber Command 617 Dam Buster Squadron was based in St Vincent's House, and Barnes Wallis worked on his design for the bouncing bomb at the former Shirley Croft Hotel nearby. The town had an important strategic location with industrial facilities being on the East Coast Main Line and the Great North Road, as well as the location of British manufacturers research company B. Marco Works, which produced a 20mm cannon for RAF aircraft. You may not know that every Spitfire and Hurricane had parts manufactured in Grantham. Our industrial base was pivotal in supporting the war effort. Other prominent engineering firms like Avery & Barford and Ruston and Hornsby also adapted their operations to meet military needs. As a result, Grantham became the target of Luftwaffe bombing. During the war, Grantham residents experienced 88 deaths, 149 injuries, 71 homes were destroyed, and 2,700 homes were heavily damaged due to the air raids. In addition, an A1661 HCU aircraft crashed at Breeders Hill, killing all 9 crew members. 3 Grantham Railway men also lost their lives while working on their duty during the war. We have accounts of Grantham munitions workers spending their days in the factories and their nights manning the air defences around our town. It was not all work. Determined to live life to the full, on Saturday they'd be out in the town still after all of that dancing to the sound of Glenn Miller and well-known artists. But the bombing was so intense and Grantham so relatively small that more lives were actually lost per head of population than in any other part of Britain during World War II. An account of one young evacuee who had left London for the relative safety of Grantham describes how, after some time, she had to be relocated to the safety of Stamford because Grantham was so dangerous to live in. Not only Grantham, but airfields across our district played an important role, training and hosting British and Allied forces, including American and Polish forces. While Stamford escaped relatively unscathed during World War II, one bomb was recorded, landing on the 31st of October, narrowly missing residents. Bourne was also heavily targeted by bombing raids. It housed the RAF Bourne airfield, which was used by heavy bombers, and the 1st Battalion of the Parachute Regiment. Colsterworth played a role in supporting the war effort, notably as a location for the RAF North Witham airfield, which housed American troops and played a key part in the D-Day landings. By 1944, Harloxton, together with all the other country houses around Grantham, was home to the 1st Airborne Division. In September 1944, the division went into action alongside the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions as part of Operation Market Garden, the largest airborne assault ever attempted. The objective of the 1st Airborne Division and the soldiers billeted here at Harloxton was the bridge at Arnhem, known to history as the Bridge Too Far. The 1st Airborne Division was effectively destroyed as fighting force at the Battle of Arnhem. It's also worth remembering that across the district, men also served with the Royal Navy and the Merchant Navy, roles which were both dangerous and hugely contributed to Britain's survival throughout the war. Grantham Crematorium is a site of Commonwealth graves. In addition to the 55 Australian and New Zealanders buried there during World War I, the cemetery is the final resting place of lost civilians and those who served during the Second World War. There were RAF graves, 58 Commonwealth graves and 1 Dutch war grave. The sacrifices made by those lived and who served in our district during World War II will not be forgotten. And today, this morning, as Ambassador for Grantham, I had the honour of laying wreaths at the crematorium. The best thing we can do is to never forget the sacrifices made, the way that we may live in freedom and peace, and that we remain ever vigilant to the insidious divisiveness that led to the horror of World War II. I will now ask that we all stand for a 2-minute silence in memory of the fallen, followed by a playing of the last post. Despite the tragic loss, today is a commemoration of victory. By working together against all the odds, caring for one another, and having the courage to stand up for what they believed in, the people of our nation and our allies and Commonwealth in World War II proved that evil can be overcome. And it is our duty to never forget that. Thank you. Thank you.
Chairman, may I read a shortish piece from the Royal British Legion website that is, I think, relevant to today?
Yes, certainly.
Yes, thank you. As the Allies closed in on a surrounded Berlin, Nazi leader Adolf Hitler committed suicide on the last day of April, and the German forces' unconditional surrender followed on the 7th of May. That day, a news flash was broadcast to the public announcing the end of the war in Europe, and that the next day, the 8th, was declared victory in Europe, that is VE Day, and a public holiday in the UK. Throughout the Allied world, millions celebrated. In Britain, pubs could stay open until late, and red, white and blue bunting could be bought without ration coupons. Streets were filled with singing and dancing, parties and parades. Special Thanksgiving services were held. Yet, the joy and relief were tempered by memories of the hundreds of thousands who had died or were still missing, and concern for those still at war in East Asia and the Pacific, which lasted until August. Following D-Day, the next several months were marked by the repatriation of 250,000 Allied prisoners of war. As the Allies swept across Europe, they uncovered the full horror of the network of concentration and forced labour camps and other locations where 6 million Jewish people and many others had been murdered. Genocide, war and forced population movements created more than 50 million refugees and displaced people in Europe. It would take many months and vast resources to care for and resettle these people. After years of uncertainty and sacrifice, the people of Europe could at last face the new challenges of reconstruction and peace. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Thank you. So thank you. We will now proceed to the main business of our meeting. Public speakers and ward councillors for the applications being heard today, please be aware that you have 3 minutes to speak and you'll be advised when you have 30 seconds left. You may finish your sentence but not another paragraph. And I will now hand over to Penny, who will read out the list of speakers for today and in the order in which you'll be speaking.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, S25-0203, change of use from use class C3 residential dwelling house to use class C2 children's care home at 9A School Lane, Colsworth. District Ward Councillor, Councillor David Bellamy, statement will be read out. Against, Ian Thorpe, Syra Parks, Darren Haycock, a statement to be read out. For the applicant, Rachel Allen, Eastland Chief Operating Officer, Melanie Fletcher, Estland Operations Director. Agenda item 5, application S24-2191, installation of solar farm with associated battery storage, solar voltaic panels, mounting systems, inverters and transformers, electrical substation, underground cabling, stock-proof fencing, CCTV, internal access tracks and associated infrastructure for a temporary period of 40 years. Land adjacent to Spalding Road, Bourne. District Ward Councillor Zoe Lane. On behalf of the applicant, Tony Gannon, Head of Downing Renewable Developments. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Penny. So we'll now go on to the main agenda item. So first of all, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We've received apologies from councillors Paul Bellows, Pam Bird, David Bellamy, Helen Crawford, Tim Harrison and Phil Dilks. Councillor Max Sawyer is substituting for Councillor Pam Bird today. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any disclosure of interest for consideration at this stage?
Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman. I believe I must literally take a back seat when the matter of the solar farm comes up for discussion.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not the decision maker, but I just must declare that I know Darren Haylock, who is written in against the first application on the agenda. Doesn't prevent my ability to give you impartial advice. I've not discussed it with him, and we only know each other because our children play football. So, just in the interest of transparency, thank you.
Thank you for that. Item 3 is minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of April 2025. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes? May I have a proposer for the minutes, please? Councillor Sawyer, and a seconder, Councillor Ellis, thank you. If I could ask for all those in favour of those minutes, please raise your hands. Thank you. Do you need us to do that again? You're fine. And for anyone against and any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you. Those minutes have been approved. Thank you. So we now move on to the order of presentation and debate. So we are looking at agenda item. It's actually been labelled 4A or 4, depending which part of the papers you're looking at. It's reference S250203, which is the change of use Class 3 residential dwelling house to the use of Class 2 children's care home at 9A School Lane, Colsterworth. And I will now hand over to our officer to take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you. This proposal is for a change of use from use class C3, residential dwelling house, to use class C2, children's care home. This is at 9A School Lane, Colsterworth. The three key issues raised are residential amenity, loss of housing, and highways safety. The site is situated on School Lane in the village of Colsterworth. It is central to School Lane and consists of a four-bedroom dwelling house with a double garage and off-road parking adjacent to the river with them. The dwelling has garden amenity space to the front, side and rear. The surrounding area consists of residential use, mainly detached to semi-detached houses and bungalows, and the church cemetery is situated opposite the site with an access off School Lane. The existing block plan. And the floor plans existing and proposed. The evaluation, the principle is acceptable. In policy SP1 and SP2, development in larger villages which promote the role and function of the larger villages, such as Colsterworth, will and will not compromise the settlement's nature and character will be supported. Colsterworth Village is a larger village. It has several amenities, including a primary school, medical practice, 2 convenience stores, and 2 play areas within walking distance of the site. The dwelling is currently a residential use, and this proposal would provide specialist housing to benefit a vulnerable group of people living in the district, in accordance with policy H4. The children's home would be limited in scale, providing housing for 2 children, ages 6 to 17, and would have no greater level of impact to sustainability and amenity terms. The dwelling is a non-designated heritage asset and in proximity to further non-designated heritage assets and listed buildings. It's not in the conservation area. There are no alterations proposed to the footprint of the plot or to the exterior of the dwelling. The building would remain similar in appearance to a residential dwelling and is not proposed to extend the building, and this would have no adverse impact on the character of the area or amenity. The Conservation Officer has not objected to the proposal. The proposal utilises the existing pedestrian access and vehicle access which meet Manual for Streets guidance. There will be parking provision on site for up to 5 vehicles. Swept path vehicle tracking analysis has been provided. The existing problems on School Lane, the trip generation would not require highway improvements, and Lincolnshire County Council as local highway authority has not objected to the proposal. So the swept path analysis, each of the parking spaces and the double garage, which is an existing garage, vehicles can enter and exit in a forward gear. In terms of planning balance, this meets all housing needs, providing accommodation for specialist housing accommodation. The dwelling would retain a residential appearance, and it would operate in a similar manner to a residential dwelling in terms of trip generation. There would be no detrimental impact on the character and appearance or heritage impact, and no detrimental impact on the surrounding highway network. The recommendation, therefore, is to authorise the Assistant Director to grant planning permission subject to conditions. Some photos of the site from the front elevation and along School Lane. Photos of the access parking and amenity space to the rear. Photographs of the landscaping around the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can we please have our first speaker coming forward? Sorry, my apologies. It will be a statement from District Ward Councillor David Bellamy.
Thank you. Thank you, Lady Chairman and Committee, for listening to my submission for this application, which is within my ward. I support the Parish Council's formal objection to this application of change of use from C3 to C2 flexible. It wouldn't be right at this point not to mention the great concern and stress this type of application brings to residents. I've had many emails and phone calls and one lost house sale already. Although not a material consideration, this will affect people's mental health, house prices and ability to sell their property, but bizarrely not a material planning consideration. School Lane, while being open at the High Street junction, rapidly narrows to a single lane track, not the ideal location to set up a commercial enterprise. Local need is touched on in the report, but the committee should be aware that LCC require applicants to go through them so that private providers can tailor their service for local need. Quote from the LCC Children's Services: working with good local independent placement providers to develop services that meets the Lincolnshire need. There's nothing in the report to suggest that this is the case, so it can be assumed that the children will be from out of country and not for local need. The shift rota suggests that the staff will have to travel some distance to the site. Why else would you have them on 48-hour rotating shifts? And this potential travelling does bring into question the sustainability of the development. This shift pattern does reduce the local traffic disruption for neighbours at shift change over times being every 2 days, So the shift pattern should be conditioned so there isn't a material change with additional traffic movements in the operation after it started, should it be given permission. I would also suggest that any more than 2 children would also impact on residential amenity with an increase in traffic and also constitute a material change. So the 2-child limit should have a cast iron condition should the application be approved. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Because that was a statement, there will be no follow-up questions. So if I could now please call Ian Thorpe. If Ian would like to come forward, please. Thank you. When you're ready, you will have 3 minutes to speak and you will be given a 30-second warning towards the end. Thank you. You just want to let us know when you're ready. Sorry? When you're ready to speak, yeah. I am sorry, but you need to make that part of your speech. If that's your introduction, sorry, it needs to be part of it.
Hello, my name's Ian Thorpe. I've lived in Colsworth for 30 years and I'm here to represent the people of the village. Dear councillors, thank you for allowing me to speak today. Councillor David Bellamy, Councillor Charlotte Vernon and Parish Council all state that this is an inappropriate place for a care home. They comment, I consider the application to be entirely unsuitable for the home it is proposed for. According to Councillor Bellamy, the Police and Crime Commission has complained about the amount of time spent on child running away. As we do not have a police station, I do regard this as a safeguarding issue. Councillor Bellamy comments, they say it's like a normal family home, but we know that it isn't. It will have an impact on public amenities. Parking. Each car will have to make 4 movements or 2 movements to park facing forward as per Essendon's parking plans. That will generate 100 car turns a day. All close amenities will be affected by noise and light pollution on their property. As mentioned before, the parking spots are not the specified width. A normal family would not generate 16 journeys a day. Essendon's figures would generate over 100 journeys a week. This will impact the amenities and the road, which is a single carriageway. This and many more journeys than a normal family would undertake. Highways have undercalculated the amount of journeys. The peace and quiet of the Little No Through Road is being compromised even further for all people that use it daily to walk, cycle, take the dog out, walk to school. Boundaries are not secure on the property, so children could easily escape. This is a safeguarding issue. The children's care home does not fit into the local plan of 2017. Safe and suitable access on School Lane will be affected. The many children and adults that use it will find it more dangerous. It will not enhance natural features, as quite a few of them have already been removed to reveal the house on the lane. Old roses, trees and many shrubs were removed in March and April. Wildlife will be affected by the changing landscape and pollution will occur. SKD's plan and the local plan, SKEN1, a care home in the centre of the village where 4 listed properties are situated within 100 metres and much natural environment is also located, cannot contribute and enhance to its conservation. It will definitely have an impact upon the quality of life of adjacent residents and properties. It will compromise the nature and the character of the settlement. Regulation 22 of the Children's Home. 9.8 does not have a private place for children to meet with family friends, solicitors and social workers. Alterations would have to be made. You cannot interact with a home as you would a normal family.
30 seconds, sir.
Right. There are many other objections. The road is not gritted, is impassable in winter. The river floods to a dangerous level. The junction is known as a problem. Cars will reverse out of the drive. The road is also used by pedestrians to access the village. Care children have no access to appropriate facilities and resources. The surgery is already overstretched. There are no local police and emergency services in Colsterworth. Any time left? There have been failings in the information provided which has been incorrect, and areas have been amended several times. It does not fit into SKT and local plans. The home cannot run like a normal family home, as suggested by the application, and the house is already registered as an Esland home.
That's time now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Does anybody, please don't run away because we may have questions for you. Do any members, Councillor Trotter? Oh, no, please stay.
Thank you very much,
stay.
Mr Thorpe.
Please stay. We may
Thank
have questions
you very much,
for you.
Mr Thorpe, for your presentation. I have my back turned. Is that the only photo that you...
I haven't been able to find any more. I've got plenty of them.
It's fine.
In 30 years, I have dug out of the lane.
Yeah, can I just say what I'm get my question out, and then because you might answer it easily then. I was fortunate enough to go on the site visit along with a couple of other councillors, but for those councillors that aren't here, with your local knowledge, could you just explain the proximity of the River Witham and the current fencing and footpath to the edges onto the property? Because I think that's quite key, and I would like the rest of my colleagues to know a bit more. Thank you.
River Witham is...
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. The actual measurements, etc., would be something the officers can advise. So we wait till questions for our officers on that. Do you have any other questions, Councillor?
Yeah, it's just, I don't think, unless I missed it, it wasn't mentioned. Just explain to me, is there a river at the bottom of the property?
There is a river at the bottom of the property, approximately 6 metres away from the boundary.
Thank you, Mr Thorpe.
Thank you. Does Councillor Vishnu Singh?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Mr Thorpe. You mentioned in your speech that the river is prone to flooding. Does it disrupt the traffic? Do you have any sort of evidence of that it's really caused it become impassable?
Yes, you have evidence of that, because the fire service were called out last year because the river flooded so high they had to rescue people at the bottom of the lane. And that evidence should be along with the council, because that was a rescue that needed to be made. The fire engine couldn't actually access any further than just beyond 9 property. So on the hill they parked up and had to rescue from that point. The river had reached up to the gates of 9A. And that's just one incident out of quite a few over 30 years that I have witnessed. And I have self-gritted that road for many years to help people get out of the lane, and I've also, in the last 2 years, I've pushed helped a Waitrose van to get out because it slid down the lane and ended up outside the house. I've slid down the lane myself in the car when I first moved in and ended up at the bottom of the bridge. And at those times it becomes impassable. So what a lot of people do is they park on High Street and then walk down the lane. Okay, so.
Thank you. Do you want to follow up, and then Councillor Sawyer?
Could you please tell us, do you live in the village? Do you live close to the site?
I live next door at number 9 School Lane.
Thank you. Councillor Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman. You touched on briefly on the needs of the children who would be accommodated. Could you be a little more specific?
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
You touched briefly on the needs of the children who would be accommodated. Could you be a bit more specific about that?
Sorry, Councillor Sawyer, that would be a question that would be appropriate to the applicant rather than to us. So, thank you, thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. you mentioned that the parking spaces weren't of the specified width. Is that a question for the officers that the officers can answer? Thank you.
That would be, thank you. Hopefully we're making a note of all these questions that can't be answered now. Does anybody else have any questions? I have one, if I may.
Yes.
It relates to the issue regarding flooding. From your experience, I'm asking this because you're a long-standing resident. How frequently, to your knowledge, does that area flood?
I would say the river floods yearly, every year. And it will flood into the field next to it, and flood the houses on the opposite side. And the current, when it's actually running through there, is actually very strong. The fire service advised nobody to actually try and walk through it. It will rise by about 2 metres very rapidly, and then it will retreat again because it will actually drain out reasonably quickly, but it will take several hours. So when it does flood, it actually floods rapidly and then retreats fairly rapidly as well. But in doing that, it makes the lane impassable for the people at the bottom and for the people, if we want to actually turn around, because sometimes we can't get out of our drive easily, so we have to drive down to actually be able to turn around. Which means basically the lane is blocked off.
Certainly. Thank you for that. Councillor Mills?
Just to follow on from that, and in your experience over 30 years, what mitigation, if any, has been recommended to be put in place with the flooding? Anything at all going on?
The Environment Agency have attended over the last several years, in actual fact. They've come down to clear drains at the bottom of the lane, so there's a drain and there's a flood, I forgot what we call them, a flood defence type of thing, which blocks the water and pushes it back towards the river, or attempts to, but that's failed quite often. And so they've been down to have a look at that, repair that. They've also been down to escort the older people out of the homes at the bottom of the lane before a flood, because they've had a warning. And I do notice that the Environment Agency have also asked others to use their flood aware, to have the number ready for the flood aware lines. So there has been some work going on, but it's infrequent. But it's not sufficient to stop it flooding, because they will never manage that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wood?
Hi.
Continuing on the flooding theme, obviously you said School Lane gets flooded. Do any of the properties actually internally, have they ever suffered any flooding? And if they haven't, how close does it get to the properties, the flooding roughly?
2 properties one was flooded totally, and the people had to be rescued from it this year. And that's probably within 10 metres of the river. Pheasant Cottage, which is fairly close to it, has had to put sandbags out to prevent flooding, and floods actually have got into theirs. The house opposite has been flooded up to its door, which is kind of level with the driveway of 9A. Other properties are affected by it further down, so at Bridgend Lane, when it's coming through from us, it actually floods the properties down at Bridgend Lane. And this year in particular was probably one of the, not quite the highest flood. We had one in 1997 which was higher, and it causes a lot of disruption for the people at the bottom of the lane. Okay.
Thank you. Can I just check, does anybody else have a question? No, in that case I have another one for you. There's a boundary fence between your property and 9A.
Yes.
Is that your fence? or does that belong to? No, we couldn't work that out when we were
No,
there.
that's a very good question. When you look at the plans for the houses, it doesn't really seem to specify with the red line who owns the actual fence. I put the fence up in agreement with the owners the last time, and we shared the cost for putting that fence up. So it's unclear as to who owns it. So neither of us have claimed responsibility for that fence, which is 1 metre away from 9A, or 1.1 metre away, and about 1.5 metres, 2 metres away from the edge of our property, the actual building.
Yes, thank you for that.
Okay.
The other point relating to that fence, I observed on the site visit that I could actually see through it into your garden.
That's correct.
Is that correct? That there is a privacy, there is no privacy there? That it looks like it from a distance, but when you actually go up to it, you can see straight through.
You can see through the fence, yeah. The reason I put that fence up was because the last one blew down when you couldn't actually see through it. So that one lets the wind blow through it, and it doesn't seem to bring the post down quite as frequently. And I'm getting a bit too old. I'm not too old, but I'm getting a bit old to put the post back in again now.
Just checking that there's no more questions? No. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would Syra Parks like to come forward, please? Thank you, Syra. Do feel free to either stand or sit. It's totally up to you, whichever you're comfortable with. And when you're ready, if you then want to press the microphone, and you will have 3 minutes to speak, 30-second warning, and please don't run away because, as you realise, we may have questions afterwards for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Syra Parks. I'm a chartered surveyor, and I'm also a foster carer and live next door to the property. We have a communal fence. My house is listed, the church is listed, the vicarage is listed, and the manor house opposite is listed. So it's a very historic area, and I think that's been missed in the research. It's also a real diverse and active wildlife population there too, with its proximity to all the trees and the river habitat. I've lived there for 11 years. We've got mixed demographic. It's a thriving village, but we do suffer with lack of public interest and facilities for our teenagers. The application is for a children's home, and Esland's website states that these children have had a range of adverse childhood experiences, have complex trauma and foster care placement breakdowns. So I would say that as a legitimate foster carer myself, if they're not able to live in the foster care system, why is the house next door but one to mine suitable as it is just a standard family home? The application states there'd be no change to the site. I have concerns about fencing, the proximity of the river, flooding across the drive of 9A recently, of which the photos demonstrate that are on the screen. And also we have a very quick route through to the A1, and some of these children that are traumatised have severe mental states of health. So I'm concerned about that part of the application. The owners have recently removed habitat for nesting birds during the nesting season, which concerns me. They've stripped away part of our crucial wildlife corridor along the front of that property. So that, again, concerns me. If there's additional lighting, that also runs across the back run that goes around the church, my house, across Mr. Thorpe's house and 9A. It's a regular occurrence. Anybody's welcome to come and sit in my garden any evening and see the bats whizzing round. The application hasn't been approved, of course, that's why we're here today, but Esland are already advertising for a deputy manager of the home. I'd just like to know why that is. The overall tone of the proposal it feels like the commercialisation of young traumatised people. The applications are becoming a bit of a pandemic, and it feels to me personally as though it's a bit of a money-making opportunity, not a long-term healing and rehabilitation solution. The owners of the property don't live there, they've never lived there, it's been continually rented. There is a to let board, but it's not available to view online, and I feel it's a real loss of a family home within the village. Icy conditions as have been covered. There's no gritting bin, there's no formal highways agreement, so the lane does get very icy, and a lot of residents don't make it out of School Lane, they choose to stay home on those days. Again, we have lots of young children that walk up and down that
30
lane.
seconds.
Thank you. And dog walkers. So it is quite a pedestrianised area, although it's vehicle access. So I feel that at 8 a.m. and 11 p.m, which is Eslen's standard shift changes, those are going to be times when, in the morning, it'll be a busy thoroughfare, but in the evening, when we've all settled down, there will be doors banging, headlights, people talking, which can trigger our dogs and our lights. So I think it'll impact this usually very quiet area. I'd just like South Kesteven also to consider our legal right to a peaceful enjoyment of our homes, and to ask whether there would be any public or any legal remedy for putting into place any financial compensation.
Thank you. I was just about to call time, but you timed that perfectly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask? No? Thank you, Patsy.
Possibly, again, another one for the officers. But with regard to the bat room that you spoke of, and you mentioned lighting, is there a need for nighttime lighting at the property? Just like to have that clarified.
That's something that perhaps the officers could actually look at and, potentially condition, actually, if necessary. Thank you for that. You mentioned the river and concerns about safety. Would you just like to expand on that, especially given your experience, as you stated, as a foster carer?
Yes. As you can see from the images on the screen, that's recent. That was in recent months, and the cottage, the other side of the river, was flooded. The house opposite the driveway of 9A, they experienced flooding right up to their doorstep, and said that in several years of living there, it's the worst they've known it, but we are seeing it flood every year now. And the flooding came up and across the base of the driveway of 9A. It wasn't passable by foot, and you certainly would not attempt to even take a vehicle through that because the torrent was so strong. We all have concerns about the river, with young children thinking it might be fun to walk through. So generally, we do talk to each other, and we have a local Facebook page to say the river's flooded, so please don't let the children wander up on their own. As they become more responsible, the villagers do let their children walk to school. They walk up there to catch the school bus, so that's a definite dead zone when the flooding occurs. The flooding comes across the footpath as well, along the bottom, so it runs parallel to the river. It comes right the way across and some way up the bank, which is the border of 9A and number 2 Spring Lane, the property that sort of abuts it.
Thank you for that. I know we were trying to work out from photographs where 9A is. It's a bit difficult when you've got basically what looks like a lot of murky water.
Yeah.
Are you able to kind of...
So as you look at that photograph on the right, if you turn left there, that takes you over the bridge, and 9A is up there on the right, the bottom of their drive. As you drove down School Lane to go to 9A, the drive is on the left. If you had carried on over that little bridge, that brings you to that point at the far area, if that makes sense.
It's basically from the other side of the bridge that you're looking across.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Trott.
Yeah, just for a little bit of clarity. So the bridge, because I kind of like, well, I have sent a video to the other councillors, but probably not everyone's looking. Am I right in saying, so you come to the bottom of where they're proposing your children's home, the river is on your left, and then there's what I call a very quaint little road bridge, but you can walk under if the river wasn't up. And as you come up the other side, if you, God forbid, going under the bridge, that cottage is on your right-hand side, and that's the one that gets flooded, isn't it? It's got no perimeter fencing. So you come down the lane, and it's on your right.
If you go down School Lane,
Yeah.
the subject 9A is on the left. Their
Yeah.
drive sweeps up.
And the cemetery's opposite.
And the cemetery's opposite, and the river runs across. So
That's
if you
it.
keep going down School Lane, there's a bit of a bridge over
Yeah.
it. The river runs right the way across. So when it bursts its banks, it comes up over the bridge and it comes right back to 9A.
Yeah.
And the whole of the footpath is flooded, and it goes all the way the other side of the bridge and right the way into the two houses that go to the right. So if you go over the bridge, as you veer right, that cottage was the one that was completely flooded. Its ground floor was flooded.
Yeah.
And the house, Pheasant Cottage, next door to that was flooded up to its door. And then the house, which is opposite 9A's driveway, the whole of their garden and patio was flooded. But because they'd got steps, they managed to stop it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Bisnash Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. Please, can we bring the previous picture of the flooding, please? Yeah. Could you possibly explain where that bollard in the front picture here, where is actually its location? Which end are we looking for?
That's looking towards 9A. So if you came out of the driveway of 9A and turned, so if you drove down School Lane and 9A is on your left, you would carry on over a little bridge which is at the bottom of that picture. So as you look at the bollard, if you go right the way to the end of the floodwaters in that picture and turn left, that takes you over the little bridge, which then takes you up School Lane, and 9A is the other side of the bridge on the right.
So, looking from the top of the church and from 9A down, you're looking down over the bridge, and then it
goes off to the right, yeah. So that's from the area on the right as you look down. It's not the most advantageous position. I didn't this year take any photographs. I kind of wish I had now. But as you walked down, even the pathway that runs along from the church at the bottom of the lane, because I live right behind the church, the actual pathway is a steep slope, and when the river burst its banks, it actually came 2 or 3 metres up the narrow bit of the path as well. That's the first time in the 11 years I've ever known it flood that high up, even the tiny footpath.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your time.
If I could call our next speaker, please, Darren Haylock. Oh, sorry, this is another statement to be read out. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We strongly object this planning application for the key matters outlined below. Number 1, the change of appearance to the property has not been included in the application, therefore no comment can be made. The planning officer's conclusion advised that there are no detrimental impacts on the dwelling or character of the area. However, the applicant is able to retrospectively change the appearance without planning approval post-application if successful, which would be a direct consequence of the change of use. For example, security fencing, commercial CCTV cameras, commercial waste bins and other necessary equipment would be detrimental to the appearance of the property and the character of the area. It is imperative that this must be taken into account when considering the application. The planning officer's report concludes that the care home would operate in the same manner to a domestic property. However, there would be a minimum of 8 vehicle movements on site at once during the 4 staff members changing over. Any further vehicle movements, such as taxi pickups for school, would add more congestion. This is also in addition to commercial waste collection and deliveries which appear to have been ignored by the Highways Department. There are no proposals or indication of how this aspect would be managed and is in addition to the already compromised access and manoeuvrability on School Lane. Adverse weather would impact on this further. Therefore, the care home would clearly not operate as a domestic residence. Number 3, a loss of amenity has already been demonstrated via the housing market with the withdrawal of sale offers on adjacent houses to the site, which is a direct consequence of this planning application. To conclude, we consider that this application should be rejected, as we have demonstrated that points referred to in the planning officer's report do not present a true reflection of the situation and information available. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So we can please call forward the applicant now to speak. Thank you. And I understand that we've got one speaker, and then if there are any technical questions, that there'll be support. Is that correct? Thank you. Just a reminder, they'll have 3 minutes and a 30-second warning.
Understood. Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Allen, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Eslin, the applicant for the 9A School Lane Planning application in Colsterworth. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. Eslin is one of the country's leading providers of specialist residential childcare, education and therapeutic services for vulnerable children between the ages of 6 and 17 who have experienced trauma and significant unrest in their lives. We have a proud track record of providing homes which offer our children safety, security and stability in a nurturing and caring environment, and our child-centric services are tailored to their specific needs. We are committed to helping our children overcome their difficult starts in life and allow them to progress into a positive and stable future as they become the best person they can be and a valued member of society as they thrive into adulthood. Many of the children Eslin care for have experienced abuse or have been subject to traumatic events. Every child deserves to grow up feeling safe, cared and loved, and we set out to provide this. Safeguarding is at the heart of what we do, and every decision we take regarding our children, whether it is the home they are placed in or the number of staff required to care for them, front and centre is the emotional and physical well-being of each child in our care. Our job is to care for them as a family and change their lives for the better. The small children's home at 9A School Lane will only house 2 children. As at all Eslin homes, the children are carefully matched to the property and to each other to ensure the best outcomes are achieved. Because safeguarding is so important, staffing levels are carefully considered. As a minimum, staffing ratios are 1 dedicated carer per child, and if deemed necessary, this can sometimes increase to 2 dedicated carers per child. In addition, a manager is available 24 hours a day should any issues arise. All Eslin care homes are regulated by Ofsted. It is intended that the small care home will operate as closely to that of a normal family home as possible and will positively integrate into the local community. No external changes are proposed. Depending on the needs of the child, they may attend schools and other activities within the local area, much like other children of a similar age. As set out in your planning officer's report, there is no policy basis to refuse the application. We therefore respectfully request that the members of the planning committee support the planning officer's recommendation to provide a much needed specialist care facility for children and young people. Thank you for your time and consideration. My colleague Mel Fletcher, who is the Managing Director for Residential Services at Eslin, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Councillor Sawyer and then Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 34, paragraph 6.22, if I can quote from it.
Sorry, can you switch your microphone off, please? Sorry, thank you.
Okay. The application includes a covering letter, and this detailed that the site would be used as a care home providing care, education and therapeutic support to young people from diverse backgrounds who have encountered a range of adverse experiences. who would provide that care, education and therapeutic support, and what professional qualifications would be expected of them?
So it's provided by 3 separate teams. We have a care team. Our carers will have a level 3 in children and residential care, and our managers have a level 5 of a similar qualification. We have an education team, a majority of whom are qualified teachers or TAs, and then we have a clinical team that are overseen by a clinical psychologist, but we have a range of qualifications there. Some are psychotherapists, some are specialist art therapists, dance therapists. It depends what the young person needs.
So I'm guessing from what you say these additional staff would be brought in as and when required.
So we have schools, so if our children require education they can go to our school, or we have an online service, so it wouldn't necessarily mean someone coming to the home. And our children generally attend clinical appointments and therapy away from the home, so that's kept away from the day-to-day environment.
Oh, I see. So the education and therapeutic aspects of it would not take place in the home?
Not generally. Sometimes, maybe. It depends on the child.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Sorry about my voice. Did I hear you correctly to say there would only be 2 children there at any one time?
Yeah, that's correct.
I am so sorry. I missed the point you made. Would you say that again, please, Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, I just said, did I hear correctly that there would only be 2 children there at any one time?
Thank you. That was confirmed. That's correct. And Councillor Trotter.
Thank you. Just need to ask you, obviously in the paperwork it says that the children will range from the age of 6 to 17 years old, and also picked up on your presentation that any placement will be carefully managed. Does that mean that the river at the bottom of the garden will have some against what age of children you're having? Because obviously the younger the children, probably the more you have to have eyes on, you know, when there is no perimeter fencing at the moment, but I presume should the application go ahead there will be fencing, but it is a concern, and I'm just picking up on you saying carefully manage, yet there's such a scope of age range, 6 to 17, so could you tell me a bit more about what you mean?
Of course. So we do balance the needs of our children against anything local that's environmental. So we wouldn't place children that we thought would be of direct risk to the river, which would probably rule out the younger children, but not necessarily depending on need. They've got one-to-one staffing, so there's always a staff member with them to guide them back to the home anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. So is that it, Councillor Josh? You didn't have another question?
Yeah, it's more to build off about what you explained about the outside agencies that are going to obviously assist the children with their education and healthcare, etc. I have got a concern about the cars parking. You've obviously, the document explains that it will be no more than 5 vehicles at a time. How can you explain how you're going to keep monitoring the staff on the children when you've got these people coming in and people going out? How are you going to manage the cars? Because there's nowhere to go, basically. It's one behind the other, isn't it? You know, you need the carers with the children and people coming in. So how are you going to manage the car movement? Because unless you go on the grass, but as we know, it's a wet area. So have you actually looked at this, and how do you think this can be overcome? Thank you.
If we do need to move a car, we've always got a manager on site during the week, so that would be the hours that a visitor might visit anyway. So the manager can keep an eye on the kids while somebody moves a car. So we do have allowance for constant supervision of the young people.
Just one final question off the back of that, Madam Chairman, if that's okay. It's only a small one. Is there any plans to make more parking on the site?
We do feel that the parking we've got is sufficient at the moment, and that is based on other homes that we run where we've got similar levels of parking and it works well. We would create more parking if we felt that it was an impact, but we don't think there will be. We think there's more than enough.
Thank you for that. Councillor Vishal Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much. Would it be possible for you to tell us about your specialist school? How far are they from these locations? And are the children going to be transported there every day?
I think in relation to education, it is to meet the needs of the child that we have. So in relation to the Esland schools, we do have a school that is located in Grantham. So from that perspective, commutable to facilitate this home if it was to be granted. But also some of the children that we do have in our homes are able to access mainstream education as well, or other independent specialist schools to meet their needs. So that's part of what we look at when we're looking at a children matching to the home. What are their educational needs and how can that be facilitated?
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? No? In that case, I have. Can you just clarify the point was made about the shift changes, the timings of the shift changes? Can you just confirm those, please?
Yeah, so our staff work 24-hour shifts because they do a sleep-in period at the home as well. So there is no night-time changeover of staff. The staff that have been there all day will also be there. There's one shift changeover time, which is, it varies, but it would be between 8 and 10 in the morning, depending on when the children go to school. And it's not every day because our staff quite often work 48-hour shifts.
So, can I just clarify that the comment that was made about shift changes at 11 at night...
that's inaccurate.
That's inaccurate. Yeah. Thank you for that. So, Councillor...
Yes, thank you. I'd like to just ask questions about where the children come from, whether they're within the district or the county. Could you explain to me that side of the procurement, if you like?
Yeah, of course. It does vary. We give priority to children from the local area. I visited one of our more local homes this morning and all 3 of the children are Lincolnshire children. So we would concentrate on Lincolnshire, Leicestershire. That wouldn't rule out children from further afield if they need placement away from their home area for their own safety, which is often a consideration for our children.
It's just that LCC are apparently looking for good independent homes. Have you made an approach to them to offer your services at this home?
Yeah, we have a business development team that work with all our local authorities, and we work very closely with Lincolnshire. So we have already made sort of links, but we've done it in relation to working with all LAs within a national basis. So we have worked with Lincolnshire before.
No, I'm asking, have you made links with Lincolnshire on this occasion?
Not on this, no, because this home obviously isn't operating yet.
Because there is an issue, isn't there, with out-of-area placements and children running away, for example. And bearing in mind Lincolnshire now have a need for more homes, I was just wondering where you fit in your provision.
We would absolutely want to place children locally if we can. We understand the importance for our children of being near to families. So when the time is right, we will reach out to Lincolnshire to let them know we've got this home opening in your area. But
you haven't asked them yet what their need is?
We know what their need is because we already work with them. This isn't our only home in Lincolnshire. We have others as well. So we know what their need is. We know that they need placements. Yeah. They refer to us every single week. They refer children to us.
Thank you. Some concerns have been raised regarding the boundary treatment, and it's not looking at the plan that's been provided. I could only see a minimal number of trees actually on that plan. It's quite a significant area with regards to wildlife habitat along that river edge and in the public domain. And does contribute to the landscape character of the area. Can you please clarify exactly what your plan is for the boundary all the way round, because it differs quite a lot on each side?
We don't anticipate at this stage making any changes. Obviously, we from a case officer review, they reviewed our plans, but we're not anticipating making any boundary changes.
We visited the site and there were clearly stakes, wooden stakes, on site, and there's been hedging cut. While we were there, you could clearly see the remains of hedging cut from the front. So, and we particularly noted that the front fencing over a steep drop over the pavement and road was literally knee height. And you talked about safety for the children. Do you consider that to be a safe boundary treatment?
Any work that's been done to date doesn't.
I'm so sorry. You can't comment there. Sorry. Thank you.
Any work that's been done to date hasn't been done by ourselves. We've done no work on the property to date. If we get there and we decide that we need a larger fence, we will of course consider whether or not we need a larger fence at the front of the property.
I'm so sorry. Can you clarify that? Are you saying that you don't currently own the property? Is that correct?
We're leasing the property.
So you're currently
but
leasing.
At this point, we've done no work, and we don't plan on changing the state of the property, if you like, other than some decoration. Right. So are you saying that you have nothing to do with the works that has been raised actually by the residents, but we observed anyway on the site visit? That's nothing to do with you.
No.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think, does anybody else have a question? No? Thank you very much, thank you. Right, looks like our question time is over. So if any officers would like to raise any of the questions that were previous, so our members would like to raise any questions to our officers that we picked up earlier, you're welcome to do so. And also we would combine this session with beginning to go into debate as well, if there is any particular comments that you may have. First of all, Councillor Bishnell-Singh and Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, Madam Chairman, I apologise very sincerely. Councillor Harrison asked me to present his apologies for absence, as he's got a doctor's appointment to have some stitches taken. So if he finishes early, he will come. I'm very, very sorry about that from it.
Thank you for letting us know. Thank you.
If he possibly can, he will come late, but you know, depending how long they take them. Now, secondly, my questions with, to our officer with regards to these applications. I'm a bit confused, and I would like some clarification, please. Under descriptions of proposal 2.1, it says this is a proposal change of use from the residential dwelling use of 3C to small children C2. Now, under 2.2, it's a Class 5 General Permitted Development Order is a mechanism to create a dual-use planning permissions. And in effect, the permission is sought for the change of use to two separate planning uses. I would like to know what is the other separate planning uses that we are considering here that has been mentioned, apart from being a care home.
Thank you, Councillor Bishnell-Singh. So, Class V is a part of the General Permitted Development Order, and essentially what that covers is a scenario where an applicant has the opportunity, as part of their application, to identify multiple uses that they may wish to develop the property for, and it allows them to interchange between that. With something such as this, what the applicant has applied for is an application for a children's care home in the Class C2. And in effect, what Class V allows under the Permitted Development Order is allows them to change use within that class, provided that it meets certain conditions of the Permitted Development Order. So that provision is permissible for a period of 10 years from the date of granting permission, and it has to ensure that it doesn't breach any condition that is imposed on any planning permission granted. So effectively what it would allow is allow two potential changes within other uses within C2 use, which may be other forms of residential, institutional care home.
I am worried about it because obviously it doesn't cause permanency for those children that is staying there. They could be there for 2 years or 3 years, then all of a sudden the landlord will say, oh, sorry, I want the things to do something else, find something else very lucrative to run on this property, so we can change to that. So I find that very disconcerting. You know, either we have got a fixed period if it is there, is it going to be for a number of years? We want to have stability here, especially when you have got children that are already suffering from certain mental problems.
With the greatest of respect, though, Councillor Bisnelson, we can't require any applicant to carry out a certain operation for a number of years. For a number of the children's care homes that have been considered and granted by this committee, you know, we can grant the permission today, they can operate for a year, there is nothing to prevent them coming in for another application to change use to a different use at that point in time. We cannot compel them to continue operation for a care home for any length of time, in the same way that we can't require it for any other type of planning permission.
So the previous application has never been for dual use?
No, as you say, Councillor Bisnelson, but by the very same token, as I say, there is provisions in there within the MPP, within the permitted development order, that allows changes of use within the use class. It is a permitted development right. It does not necessarily require them permission from us. There is an opportunity then for any of the other permissions that we've granted to make use of that right if they wish to.
Ask how far this, how wide is it, this permitted change of use? Are there any, will it be indirectly in relations to care home or providing care for children, or can it be used for other purposes, for adult care home, for example?
It allows changes of use effectively within the same use class. So in this case, Class C2 is a reasonably broad sort of use class that allows residential institutions. That is effectively what it covers. So as I say, it covers things such as children's care homes, more wider spread care homes such as potentially elderly accommodation, that sort of thing. It is a potentially wider use, but effectively all falling under the term of a residential institution.
Councillor Mills and then Councillor Smith. Oh, and Councillor Ellis.
Sorry, just to follow on, Adam, please, from that discussion. Is that what the condition 3 is about, which is no other use within use class 2, to ensure the development operates as assessed? Does that remove that permitted right?
In effect, as I say, yes, because one of the stipulations of the permitted development order is that it cannot conflict with a condition on the permission that is granted. And as you say, Councillor Milne, there is a very clear condition imposed there which restricts the manner in which it can be used and the number of children that can be used in that property.
Thank you.
Forgive me for interjecting, because normally I would wait, but on the same line, how can we be assured that the conditions we apply today would be adequate to cover a future change of use if the future change of use can be applied for in effect without, for example, it coming back to committee or to officers?
It comes back to that point that we've just made, Councillor Morgan. There is a planning condition imposed. The permitted development order has a very clear stipulation within it that you cannot undertake a change of use if it conflicts with a condition on the permission granted. There is a condition suggested in front of you which we are suggesting would restrict that potential change of use from taking place, and that's where you can get a degree of comfort from.
Okay, I'm not totally convinced by that, because we're obviously looking at a particular set of conditions based on a particular environment and use of the site. It may not contradict an existing condition that we've put in place now, but in fact it may be something that in future we would have wanted to have conditioned as a new scenario has occurred. I'll really, because I have to say it's one of the first times I've seen this on an application such as this.
Thank you, and might ask the solicitor to help if he wants to give any further advice. But I think it's for this very reason that we don't give permission for a youth class, we give permission for a youth. So in this particular instance, we'll be giving permission, if approved, for the use of the property as a children's care home, happens to fall in youth class C2, and we would have a recommended condition that controls that. Again, controls it because the use currently happens to fall into youth class C2. The reason that you do that is because youth classes do change from time to time, and we've had that with the old youth class A, for example, which was retail. It now falls under one of the youth classes, and that's why it's really important that we get that condition right and we talk about the use on the permission, not the youth class per se. In terms of what I think you're also trying to ask about, what if something else happened in the future that we don't currently know and could we have restricted it? I think unfortunately that's just the risk that happens with any permissions. We can only determine the application based on the current law, the current guidance, the current legislation, and you can't foresee every eventuality as to things that may change. I think really, although there is a commentary in the report about youth class V and the changes that allows, because we've got condition C, it's probably actually a moot point that I think is probably confused rather than help the situation. So I think condition C as drafted does deal with that eventuality about restricting that down to that youth class. I don't know, I'll just look over to ask this in case he wants to add anything.
No, I don't. I think that's explained it very clearly. I think the important thing is to recognise that it's the use that is going to be governed by this permission. The condition restricts what would otherwise be permitted changes of use as proposed, and in the future anything sort of outside of that bracket would need to come back through some kind of application anyway, whether it's a committee application or other referral. It would need to be controlled at the appropriate time in the appropriate manner. And also just touching on the point raised just before about uses potentially changing in the future, and that's always going to be, that's really beyond the scope of what the committee should really consider. Is what happens if someone comes along and changes it. That's, you can't, all you're doing is applying, is the planning permission acceptable, is the use acceptable now as you look at it, not on what they might choose never to implement it. They might choose to implement it and then use it for 10 years. They might use it for 6 months. You can't go beyond that.
Thank you. I think the concern is, though I think it has been answered, that in effect we're writing a blank cheque based on that. And it sounds like that's not the case, that the condition that's there would actually control it. So if there was an abuse outside the children's home, then actually they would have to come back to us. I think that's the assurance that we need. Thank you. I did say Councillor Smith, but I do apologise because I think Councillor Ellis actually had her hand up first, and then I'll come to you if that's all right. Are you okay? Okay, sorry, Councillor Fisher.
Legal officer, this time scale, is that fixed for the period of the 10 years? Or is that variable after that?
Okay, so the bit about Class B, that's in legislation, and that 10-year period is fixed in the legislation. However, the condition that we're recommending, which effectively removes that permitted development right, because it means that the use must stay as a children's home within that use class, for up to 2 children, that remains until such a point that that condition is removed, varied, or replaced by a different planning permission for something. So that would stay in perpetuity unless and until the planning authority removes, varies, etc. that condition.
Thank you. Councillor Smith in that case, and then Councillor Ellis. Thank you. And I think Councillor... Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Mr Weeks, if you...
I'll just clarify. I don't know if I accidentally caused confusion then when I said 10 years. I was using that as just an example of anybody could use anything for any period of time, be it 10 years, 6 months, if they choose to. You can't control and think about how long is this going to be used for. You're just looking at the use. So when I said 10 years, I wasn't referring specifically to the number in the legislation. That was just a bad example. So apologies for the confusion.
The thing that I wanted to be certain, if it is 10 years, if somebody that come to the school at the age of 5, by the age of 15, that's it, it's going to be big changes in their life. Or does it continue till his age?
I think it's, if I may interject from other experience, my understanding of therapeutic care is that it tends not to be for example, a long duration. It tends to be dealing with issues at the time, and then usually children might move on, and then more children come in. That's my understanding of therapeutic care. It's a bit different to long-term foster care, for example, or adoption or anything like that. It's different. Sorry, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had 2 questions. Firstly, it was related to the condition. So I understand the bit about no other use within class 2, and I think it's good that it says about 2 children because it's quite a large house. So that will hopefully give some reassurance. But one of the arguments put forward is that it's good for children in care within the Lincolnshire system. And I just wondered if there was any way we could condition it for local children in any way. No? Shaking your heads. Okay. And my second point was just to clarify something, really. It was sort of with regard to how much responsibility we have for the children that will be in the care, because we've heard quite a lot of comments about flooding and risk and whether there's a fence there and how safe it is, and it's just whether that should be a material consideration for us or whether that's more the responsibility of the people that will be running the care home. Thank you.
Essentially, what we are looking at with the planning application is the use of the property itself and whether we think it is appropriate to use that property as a care home. There is a lot of points of objection which have been referenced in the report and covered by many of the members of the public today. Very reasonable concerns to have. A lot of them, though, relate to the actual operation rather than the actual use itself. And there is a separate regulatory regime run by Ofsted in terms of registering these properties that covers a lot of those points in terms of the actual quality of care provided. We are looking purely at the actual use of the property itself, and in effect, if this is a well-run property, is it suitable in that location? That's effectively the question that committee are being asked today.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis and then Councillor Mill. Then Councillor Wood.
I'm going to refer back to the previous questions I asked. That was one of the people objecting suggested that the parking bays were not of a specified width, and I'd like an answer to that. Shall I ask all my questions together?
You're welcome to, yes.
Yeah. Then there was the issue of the backlawn and whether there would be flood lighting or nighttime lighting. Would that be necessary within the scope of the change of use? And then also, and kind of relates back to Councillor Smith's issue, is in the report it says that the property is in a flood zone 1, which is low risk. We know we had exceptional flooding last year. And how much weight should we as a committee give to that? Because there was a lot of questions, a lot of talk about the flooding. How much weight should we give to that as an issue for the change of use? Because that's obviously what we're here to discuss. That's it. Thank you.
So, in answer to your first question about the parking spaces, they were illustrated on the plan that I showed you in the presentation, and they are all a standard size. They're approximately 2.3 metres by 5 metres, and the average car is 2 metres wide and not as long as 5 metres. So, and on the sweat path analysis, they showed an estate car, so kind of the size of a Volvo in those parking spaces. The garage is slightly wider, although it's not the widest of the double garages, but you still have 2.7 metres by 5 metres for each of the spaces. And the sweat path analysis did show that vehicles can enter and turn around, albeit a few of them were a bit more tricky and involved a bit more manoeuvring. So they are a standard size, the parking spaces, in answer to that question. In regards to lighting, there were no details about lighting provided on the application form, and I'm not sure if it's necessary to provide floodlighting. This is still a residential type use, and this is something that, with the issues raised with bats, that could potentially be addressed by a condition requiring lighting that is suitable for bat proximity. And I'm not sure about the flood weight question, whether that's an issue for me to answer.
Yeah, I'll pick up on the flooding point. So obviously we've seen a number of photos in terms of flooding, particularly from those sort of exceptional events that we've seen from the start of this year. What the flood maps do show is that the property itself is within flood zone 1. There is an element of the actual access into the property that does fall within flood zone 2. And if you were to have a flood event such as the one that we've seen, it's probably more the actual access and providing safe access is more of the concern rather than potential risk of flooding of the property itself. There is potential, if members are particularly concerned, that we can look to impose conditions for something such as a flood evacuation plan. So if for whatever reason that access is blocked off, what are the alternative arrangements in place to make sure that there is still adequate arrangements for people to exit the property. And as I say, that is something that is within the gift of the committee to consider if they think is necessary in this case.
Thank you. If we can please have Councillor Wood, if you'd like to.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I must admit I've got grave concerns about the application. I don't know whether planning officers can alleviate my concerns, but I suppose the first one is it's a residential property at the moment. This application is to convert it into a children's care home. I can't help thinking it's the wrong property in the wrong location, and I also think it's out of character for that location in that area. I've also got grave concerns about safety aspects. We talked about the river, and I know, Adam, you say it's flood zone 1. I'm unsure about how up-to-date these flood zones are with current events on flooding. We seem to be getting flooding a lot more frequently now. The river seems very near it. It seems a danger, really. And I didn't hear any mitigation things about making it safe to stop children falling into or going into the river. So I think there are safety issues with that. The river is very near. There are flooding issues. And also on traffic. Now, I know Links County Council highways, unless it's really severe, they won't object to it. And I noticed they say there's no real definition of severe, but in their opinion they say it's not severe. But from clearly what I've seen and what I've heard, there are traffic problems and there are transport problems getting there. So those are my main issues with it, and unless those are resolved, I can't support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Trotter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My views are this house in itself, the house, is probably suitable for use. It's a nice house, it's a big house for the children, but once you step outside, I am concerned. The applicant states probably not suitable for younger children in close proximity to the river, which is a concern, because if any young children do go, they've admitted it's probably not the best place. It's a very steep driveway, potentially icy. I feel we're probably playing with safety of children's life. If it's teenagers, they're drawn to water, as we know, in recent, with hot weather, they're drawn to going in deep waters. I'm not saying that the River Witham is deep at the moment, but it is a magnet. The parking is a serious problem. There's a lack of boundary fencing. If this is implemented, like we've seen at other children's home, is it going to affect the character and appearance of the area? Then we've got to take into consideration that the neighbours, the cemetery is opposite with really in character metal fencing. As Madam Chairman, you pointed out, already it's had work done to it, which the applicants aren't aware of. There was low metal fencing, that's not suitable. All the vegetation is ripped out. I'm just really concerned. I'm going to weigh the safety of children against, the application and change of use. As I say, I have no problem with the house. I feel for the children. Hopefully they are coming from Lincolnshire, but we've got no, we can't control that. But you can control safety of children. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So Adam, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll just come back on a couple of points that Councillor Trotter and Councillor Wood have just made. Again, very valid concerns in terms of safety, and you've made the point there, Councillor Trotter, about boundary treatments. Again, and we've seen it on one of the appeal decisions at Salsford Road, it's within the gift of the committee, if they want to impose a condition to require details of boundary treatments to be submitted before first occupation. That gives you the length of control, an element of control through the approval of those details to make sure that they are appropriate for that character and appearance of the area. That is an option available to you. Likewise, in terms of the parking arrangements, in essence, what you've got to be satisfied at this point is whether a solution is available. If that solution that's been presented in front of you today, in terms of details submitted, you're not satisfied with that actual arrangement, but you're satisfied that it could be achieved on site, again, there are conditions that we've got drafted based on those from Salford Road, where you can impose details requiring a parking management plan showing how that parking would be provided. So again, I appreciate a number of the concerns raised by committee. Just bear in mind there are a number of things that we can address via planning conditions, though.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I just feel that you're trying, from what you've said to me, there are all these concerns, and we're just trying to get it to fit. We're trying to get the area outside the house to fit to what we want, and that's not always the best thing. Too many concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mill. And then Councillor Bishnell Singh, and then I will comment as well.
Yes, thank you. I am going to return to where the children are coming from and our policy H4. Venezia, you mentioned in your presentation that the children would be coming, living in the district. I wonder, have you got evidence from LCC that they say they would use this home? I don't know why you said living in the district to suit those children when we've just heard they actually could come from anywhere around. And how does that comply or not with policy H4, meeting all needs, which is meeting the needs of households in the district? We often have this argument, don't we? And we also feel that we'd like to help LCC in this. You know, if it's suitable for LCC, then we might put a different complexion on it. If it's local children who aren't as likely to run away, maybe the police chasing them around the countryside. So I wondered if you could just clarify those two elements for me first. Thank you.
So Lincolnshire County Council, they produced a recent children in care sufficiency strategy, and this details Lincolnshire's position in terms of children in care, and the population of children in care is increasing, and they're keen to find placements. They're increasing in-house children's homes, but they still require placements in independent homes, and they aim to place children close to home but at the moment we have 53% of children not being placed in Lincolnshire. So this would meet the policy requirement because it would provide specialist care housing in our district, which Lincolnshire County Council may then wish to place children into this home.
Okay, I'll leave it there. But, you know, I think this is an issue we need to really work on because Policy H4 is obviously talking about some statistics that created Policy H4, looking at need in our district. And all we seem to be getting in the area are out-of-area home provision. And I get what LCC is saying, that they want to develop services that meet the Lincolnshire need, and they explicitly say that they would like those independent providers to go to them and work with them to provide it. And I haven't seen any evidence of that today. So they want to see growth is in line with the Council's vision. So I'm just wondering where that does fit with Policy H4, because we're not actually bottoming that local need.
Right. Shall I have Councillor Smith and then Councillor Bushnell saying?
I was just going to say that from what's been debated, I'm concerned that there's not a strong enough sort of single material consideration for us to refuse this application. And I wonder whether if we condition for a flood plan, for a parking management strategy, and for specific fencing, whether we should approve this application.
Thank you. Sorry, forgive me. I think it might be worth me interjecting at this point with some of the thoughts I've had in discussions with our officers at Razor. My particular concern, I don't really care where the children come from, but I do care about their safety. And I'm also a qualified childminder, actually a home-based childminder. And I took one look at that site and one look at that river, and common sense told me this is not a safe location for children. For several reasons. First of all, you have that significant drop at the front of the property going down onto the main road. And then on top of that, you've got the river running nearby, which does draw children. Children are drawn to water. It doesn't actually have to be particularly deep. I think the guidance, like 6 inches of water, if it's fast flowing, can actually sweep you away. So it does really concern me. The fact that the ages of the children have been considered because of that tells me there is an issue there. As it happens, I have visited the site where we previously approved an application. In fact, there was then a request for a further number of children on site at Hoffham, and it was totally different site. Flat, surrounded by high hedgerows, no such safety issues on the immediate vicinity. So I actually, in all consciousness, don't feel I could support this application. I really couldn't. And then on top of that, if we look at the actual boundary, I have to say we were actually walking on layers of bird poo when we did our site visit down the driveway, which just gives an indication of the level of wildlife that there is in the area. And I particularly noted that we made a particular point of taking photographs of views of the site from the churchyard and also from the bridge and from the road. And it's very clear that the vegetation, trees, hedges and everything else actually significantly contributes to the landscape character of the area and also the setting of the listed buildings in the near vicinity. So I have concern about that. How we could condition boundary treatment, but that may, in order to create a safe environment, but I could see that potentially having a negative impact on the character. I can't just square that square that. The other concern I had was regarding the boundary treatment relating to the neighbouring property. I could see straight in, at a distance it doesn't look too bad, but you could actually see straight into their property. Now, unfortunately, I have been dealing with casework in my ward where an approval was granted to a local school which has children with special needs who are actually mostly shipped from all across the county and outside. And that particular type of fencing, I know, is completely unsuitable for that particular environment. With the best will in the world of one-to-one care, you cannot keep an eye on somebody for 24 hours a day, even at a break, going to the toilet or drink, or you just can't physically do it. I'm not persuaded about the ability to keep the children safe. To me, that's a primary concern. I did check policies around that, and I identified potentially MPPF 102 paragraph A, which refers to it's a broad policy that relates to the consideration of the safety of children and open water, and mainly relates to larger developments. However, thanks to our officers, because I raised a concern earlier, what they did was they looked at paragraph MPPF 115B, which relates to safe access, and also to 181E, if that's correct, which is again about safe access and escape routes. They think that they could apply. For me, the bottom line is it a safe site? And I don't think it is. And to me, safety is a prime consideration, and I believe is a strong enough reason to refuse if the committee is so minded to. So I'd be interested to hear. That's a response, hence me responding to your point. I'll be happy to have. Yes, certainly.
Thank you. I'm not going to make comments on anything you just said, Councillor Morgan. I just wanted to clarify, Councillor Smith, were you making a proposal or were you just stating your thoughts at that moment in time? Because I wasn't sure whether you were making a proposal, in which case to follow due process would need to be seconded, etc. Thank you.
I'm happy to make it as a proposal. Yeah.
So can you clarify what you're proposing approval?
Yeah, so I would propose, I mean, I completely have sympathy with everyone who's raised concerns, but yeah, I was proposing approval, but with conditions for a flood evacuation plan, parking management strategy, and for fencing or boundary treatment. Yeah, so those three things.
In that case, may I ask if we have a seconder for that proposal?
I'm happy to second the other thing. I'm happy to second the other thing I would say is about the lighting, that we have something that there is no nocturnal lighting.
Would Councillor Smith be happy to have that amended in her motion?
Yeah, no overnight floodlights.
So for clarity, recommend for approval with conditions to seek details of lighting, details of all boundary treatments prior to any occupation, further details regarding the parking and manoeuvrability on site, and a flood evacuation plan.
Can you clarify what the boundary treatment that you'd be expecting to be based on the comments I made? I just need to understand that, whether it's to increase the security and safety of the site or whether it's to protect the existing wildlife habitat and landscape character.
I think the main concern that's been discussed has been regarding the children's safety, so that should be included, but also yeah, anything to promote the wildlife in the area would be beneficial, but ultimately it would come back to the officers to determine.
You can, yeah.
Just to say we have to give reasons for conditions, so as part of that reason we can bring in the security, but we could also bring in the visual appearance of the property, because I think that has been discussed, if that helps.
So, were you happy to accept that, Councillor Ellis? Okay, thank you. In that case, what we'll do, I think, is we'll go to vote on that, because we have discussed this a bit. So, all those in favour of approval, please raise your...
Can we have what are we voting on? What was it?
The current proposal is to approve the application with conditions relating to a lighting condition, boundary treatment condition, parking plan and
flood evacuation.
Flood evacuation.
With regards to the boundary treatment plan, does that include preservation of some of the mature trees that is there? Because according to the plan on page 41, basically they'll be removing some of the trees, only 2 left.
That's the consideration that you will need to have when you vote, because that was a concern I raised earlier. That's my concern.
It must be in the condition. And also we don't plan to go by the again. Because there's quite a lot of major trees that are right there that we really need to preserve.
So just to clarify, that the plan that's before us doesn't state removal, but what it implies it, because in fact there's only 4 trees left in total actually on the site in the plan presented to us. So that's the implication if we accept what's before us. Yeah.
I wouldn't accept it as it is.
In that case, what I'd like to do is move forward to the vote. So if I can ask all those in favour, please raise your hands.
Sorry, can I just ask, in terms of the removal of trees then, just to be clear, how many trees are they proposing to be removed in the current plans?
If I explain from those of us who did the site visit, and I think there was a picture, there was a significant number of trees which are almost like an overgrown hedgerow along the entire boundary. The plan that's before us only shows 4 trees remaining, so that would imply that most of... And I'm saying this because that's exactly what happened at the school, where we approved the site application without specifying.
Could we condition that the trees that are currently there remain?
Sorry, Councillor Bishnell saying.
Page 41, Madam Chairman. There's only 2 left.
Page 41, there's only 2 left.
Sorry, so the application is not actually seeking removal of any trees at all. You've got on page 40 an existing block plan that shows the sort of 4 circles around trees, although one of them looks like it's double stem, so it's probably actually 2 trees. So there would be at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trees shown, and it's exactly the same on the proposed plans. So there's no trees proposed to be removed. I understand the point that you're making, that there's more trees and there's more shrubs than that on site.
Yeah, if I can come back, I'm so sorry. It's only through horrible, bitter experience and I'm happy for anyone to check the records at Springwell Academy on New Beacon Road, Grantham, and we had a very similar situation where there was in fact originally an entire hedgerow and also some fencing, and the application was approved with the plan just like that, only showing actually the fencing treatment. In this case, we've got the few trees left, and that was then taken as being an approval of the loss of all of the other boundary treatment subsequently. So unless there's something to protect that, I'm not willing to accept that. Sorry, because unfortunately based on bitter experience.
Obviously, we've got a motion on the table, and it is obviously possible for motions to be amended before they're voted on, or if it's voted on, falls and a subsequent amendment may happen. We don't know that the applicant is proposing to take any trees out or any shrubs or bushes, and certainly can't stop them going home and doing that now either, because it's a dwelling and they're not currently protected. But what we could do is impose a condition requiring a landscaping scheme, and then there's also a second condition that we would normally impose on that to protect the landscaping within that first 5-year period. You'll have seen that sort of condition on new housing developments, for example. So that is an option that either could be added now or it could be added should the motion on the table fail, or we go to a completely different motion. Thank you.
Thank you. So that would mean adding the proposal for landscaping scheme to the proposal before us. Thank you. Are you happy to?
Yeah, I'd be happy with that because, yeah, ultimately, as it's a residential property, they could remove the trees anyway. So.
Thank you. Do we have? Are you supporting that, Councillor?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to support that.
Thank you, Councillor Sawyer.
Thank you, Sharon. Would it be helpful to separate the vote on these conditions from the vote to approve? It seemed the vote seems to be combining the two. If these conditions are approved, then we approve the application.
If I can clarify what we'd be voting on, if we vote for this, we're saying that this is acceptable with those conditions applied. If you do not feel that is the case, that the conditions don't overcome your concerns, then you don't vote for it. You either abstain or vote against it. Just to clarify that. So based on that, because I do think we've had quite some debate and looked at, I think, the core issues or concerns, I'm now going to propose that we go to the vote. So all those in favour of this application with the conditions, please raise your hands. All those against, please raise your hands. And any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you. So that was not carried. So therefore, we will be seeking acceptable, reasonable reasons for refusal.
Or alternate additional conditions.
Or, if appropriate, additional conditions that we think might overcome the concerns. To help people off, my main concern is the location and proximity of the site to the river, and with the best will in the world, I just don't feel we can guarantee the safety of the children on that site, not without making significant changes to the actual property overall, the boundary treatments that would in effect result. And even then, if the gate's left open, it isn't secure. So, Councillor Smith, and then Councillor.
I mean, I'm totally agreeing with what you've said, Madam Chairman. I just don't know, having visited the site, how you could get the boundary fencing without absolutely. They're really established trees. There's a big horse chestnut as well, isn't there? I just don't know. There is no sort of boundary at all. I just can't think it's feasible. I just think all these conditions, I know that there's goodwill there, but I just can't, like I said before, it's as if we're making it go, with all these conditions, that's the only way it can be safe, really, but I don't think they're feasible, having seen the property. I don't know.
Thank you. Did Councillor Ellis, you wanted to say something, and then Councillor Smith?
Is it possible, given that the safety is the major point of contention that we condition the age of the children, because obviously if, you know, teenagers are less likely, possibly, to be attracted by the river.
May I respond to that? Because from experience, going back to, unfortunately, the experience at Springwell Academy, where the police were being called out 36 times in 1 year. That's police, not just needing help. The older children actually were then more able to scale an 8-foot fence. That's my concern. How do you ensure the safety and security of those children? It's one thing doing that when you're somewhere like Hoffman, where the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to land on a pavement. It's quite another when it could be straight. I mean, it's hard to describe. It's such a shame actually more didn't come to the site visit, I have to say. There is a steep, it's not only next to the river, there is a steep drop the other side of the boundary, and then you're down into the river on one side, and there's a steep drop, a very steep drop on the other, which currently, as I said, has a very, very, very low, and in my view, completely. I know Ofsted will not accept that front edge. Works would have to be done to make it safe to meet their requirements. From my own experience, having had Ofsted inspections. I would not otherwise be, if I felt there was a way around this, because I do support the need to provide care homes and an environment like this for 2 children. And I, just for the record, I approved the Hoffman application. So, you know, it takes a lot for me to say no, but I just do not feel convinced by this site at all. So, Councillor Vishnav Singh.
Madam Chairman, I've got a number of concerns, actually. My concern is about the boundaries. The fence between number 9 and 9A, very flimsy fence. Yeah. The other fence that is in the front of the house, which is only about less than a foot and a half or 2 foot at the most, is a very tiny metal fence. But any children can fall over the very steep roadside that is there. You know, it goes straight down. Now, that is another thing that needs to be treated or raised up if you're having children there. Okay, it's been mentioned that these children range from 5 to about 17. Yeah, so if you've got young children that is there, so we need to provide certain safety. And also the boundary to the alongside the river, that's got a very steep rise to all the trees that you have mentioned there. That needs to be sewed up so that we don't have any landslide, things like that. So I feel, from a health and safety point of view, I'm very concerned about the site, and also I'm concerned about wildlife from it. But there's those 2 things that can be rectified if to have a solid wall between the 2 properties, number 9 and number 9A. That will one thing probably will appease, and then the front. The treatment of the front and the steep stairs, but we have steps up to climb up to the said property. And also my third concern, probably that's of little value, of losing a good family homes.
Thank you. Well, what I'm going to do is propose a refusal, and I'll be seeking a seconder on that, please. Councillor Trotter, thank you. So we have a proposal to refuse. I have referred to MPPF 115B, and I still believe 102A, which specifically refers to children and open water, although in a certain context, I will admit. And then I understand 181E. MPPF 181E applies as well. Sorry, and you?
I think it's 102.
102. Yeah, 102A. And I think that is basically a number of policies that are all wrapped around the protection of the children. I would use EM1 and the character of the landscape, but if this goes ahead on child safety, then that that would not apply in that case, or does not go ahead rather because of child safety. Sorry, Councillor Trotter, then I'll come to Councillor.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not applicable to the change of use, but can there be any wording? I mean, let's not forget that even though there's just two children, they've quite clearly in the document got special needs and they need supervision constantly, because we do always get there's nothing different to a family home, but that's, you know, I don't know if Emma can, the wording, but you know what, we're not, the safety is particularly a worry because of the nature of the children, and it won't always be the same children with the same needs. Some children might, you know, might not have the concerns that others, but that is why the safety is an issue.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from there. I know that our papers relate to the Hoffman case, but at the Saltersford case and that went to appeal, the planning inspector quite clearly stated that in their opinion, the children's home was not the same as an ordinary family home, and therefore it was particularly appropriate to apply. In that case, boundary treatment was the solution. Unfortunately, that site was not next to the river. So to me, I have to say, what's different between those sites? And it's that river. To me, is the main thing. Yeah.
Thank you. I think the other important difference between the Hoffman site and the Saltersford site, because it is, as you say, quite reasonable, if we've got a concern, it needs, and it can be addressed by conditions, we should impose it. So there's been conversations about the existing boundary fences not being suitable. That's what a condition would do. It would secure details of an additional condition, but that's been a recommendation and it's failed. The other difference is the size, and the Hoffman scheme, the inspector decided it was not a material change of use, and that in that particular instance, that particular set of circumstances, it was not material in terms of going from a family home to the care home in that particular instance. Saltersford Mill was a slightly larger care home, so that is the material difference there. But you're absolutely right, you can impose conditions on boundary treatments, provided they are justified, and we've got a good planning reason to do so, and safety would be, and also having control over them from an aesthetic perspective as well would be a reason to require those details.
Thank you.
I think the difficulty with this particular site is, in order to actually address the concern around the safety and its location so close to the river and the steepness, it's almost like a mini castle actually. I think that's probably, if you visited it, that's probably the best way to describe it, with almost like a moat running down one side. You'd have to then lose the landscape character in order to fortify that boundary to make it safe, and then that totally changes the character of that area. And I think this is the difficulty. So I don't know if the officers feel that the reasons we've given are adequate, but I believe that if we go on, obviously we can identify which policies might be appropriate, but if we can go on the safety concern due to the location and proximity of the river. We have also, of course, had the evidence today regarding flooding, which we haven't really touched on much in the debate, but it did really strike me the regularity now of that. But I felt that, unfortunately, that's a weaker argument only because we haven't had any opposition, from my understanding, from any of the appropriate authorities who we consulted on that, which makes it harder for us to challenge that. Would I be correct there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Adam and Philip perhaps trying to draft a little bit of wording on the issue. But in relation to flooding, you're absolutely right, Councillor Morgan. We do get regular updates of those flood maps from the Environment Agency, who are responsible for telling us essentially where flood zones 1, 2 and 3 are. The site itself is in flood zone 1, the access is in flood zone 2, and then closer to the river will be flood zone 3, which is where it's most likely to flood. That doesn't mean, just because something's in flood zone 1, it doesn't mean it won't flood. It just means the likelihood of flood events is a lot less than if it were flood zone 3, which is always that closer area to the main river course, or usually is that closer area. So I think we don't have the evidence to support that flooding is a reason for refusal in this particular instance. I completely understand the concerns, and I think we saw 6th of January, and I only know that date because it was also 6th of January the previous year, where we had some really severe flooding across a lot of the district. And obviously there's lots of things that are going on at the moment with climate change and things that are affecting flooding. But based on the evidence we've got at the moment, flood risk, I think would be a difficult one. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Smith, your hand.
Sorry, yes. My only comment was that this is a sort of 4 to almost 5 bedroomed house, so presumably over the years children will have lived there. So, you know, as a mum or someone looking after children, you know there's a river at the bottom of the garden, and like Adam's already said, we've got to kind of put some sort of faith in this being a well-run children's home, and hoping that they also see that as a safety issue. And we've kind of mentioned boundary issues. So I'm a little bit concerned about us citing the river and risk. I understand it's a risk, but it's not stopped other children from living in the house in the past.
Can I respond to that? That's actually an assumption. You've got no evidence to back that statement up. What we have been told is actually the property's been leased on long term for some time, and there might be good reason for that. The other issue, which actually we haven't really touched on, is that in order to access it from the front, there is a very, very steep step. I have disability issues. I couldn't use the steps going up to the front of the property. I certainly wouldn't want to be a mum with a toddler in a pushchair attempting to climb those stairs, those steps. Another point, actually, which hasn't really come up in debate, I wasn't satisfied with the internal layout of the property, actually, especially taking into consideration the potential needs of the children, because in fact it was completely open plan on the ground floor. So there was full access to the kitchen area, and there was nowhere, for example, if the adults needed to have a meeting downstairs, the only place they could go that would have been private would be a bedroom upstairs. So I didn't raise that earlier because I felt that wasn't the overriding concern. But I actually think there are actually a number of other concerns that related to that site. Yeah, so, sorry, just to make that point. So just looking at it as it is, yeah, I would have concerns. Have we?
So just listening to what's been said, I think if members are minded to go down the refusal route, I think listening to what's been said already, one of the important things the reason for refusal has got to do is differentiate between the current use of the building as a dwelling house and the proposed use. So it needs to consider that there's that additional staff movements that have been discussed, and the potential vulnerability of the type of children that would be in the care home. Paragraph 181, which was referenced by the chairman, if I just read the relevant parts of that, it's subtly different to the child safety aspect. It talks about where development, or effectively part of development, is located in a higher risk area. So in this case it's that bottom bit of the access that's down by the river. Section E says that development should provide safe access and escape routes, are included where appropriate as part of an agreed emergency plan. So I think that, you know, if that part of the National Planning Policy Framework was to be used, it would the reason would relate more to the fact that in those flood events, due to the fact that access was in, or part of the access was in flood zone 2, and taking account of the use that's proposed the children's care home, it's the concern that it hasn't been demonstrated that there isn't safe access and escape routes for those occupiers and potentially the staff of the proposed use. And I think there's also then, I suppose the second part of that has been said, that the measures to make that safe, whether it's through those increased or changed boundary treatments, could also lead to a impact on the character and appearance of the area. But I think that's, you know, as I say, it's subtly different from the fact that, you know, there's just a risk that there's a watercourse at the bottom of the garden or close to the garden that would pose a risk to the children. It's more the risk that would occur, or the problems that could occur in the event of a flood risk event from either accessing or leaving the property.
So, thank you. Could I just look also, or ask us to examine the original policy which I found, accepting that point, which I do think is very valid. If we look at paragraph 102A, I'll try and read it, and I do apologise, my mobile phone's about to die.
Shall I read it?
Yes, please. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so paragraph 102 of the MPPF states, planning policies and decisions should promote public safety and take into account wider security and defence requirements by, and point A, is anticipating and addressing, where possible, malicious threats and other hazards, whether natural or man-made, especially in locations where large numbers of people are expected to congregate. Policies for relevant areas such as town centre and regeneration frameworks, and the layout and design of development should be informed by the most up-to-date information available from the police and other agencies about the nature of potential threats and their implications. This includes appropriate and proportionate steps that can be taken to reduce vulnerability, increase resilience, and ensure public safety and security. The safety of children and other vulnerable users in proximity to open water, railways and other potential hazards should be considered in planning and assessing proposals for the development. I should add that there's a footnote, and that footnote states that this includes transport hubs, nighttime economy venues, cinemas, theatres, sports stadia and arenas, shopping centres, health and education establishments, places of worship, hotels and restaurants, visitor attractions and commercial centres. My concern about the use of that particular policy is I think that it's really aimed at those larger venues and facilities. It's not aimed at this type of development. It's really steering us to those bigger schemes where you can have a lot of people congregating, whether that, and it obviously talks about some of those uses. I think between Adam and Phil, they've, or maybe Adam has drafted some suggestions, and that would rely on paragraph 108, which I think is probably the stronger point in this particular instance.
If I could just pick up the, just reading in there, it clearly specifically refers to children and water, which is our concern, and also health and education establishments, which we have been told quite clearly this is. So actually, whilst I totally agree with you, the overriding policy is around, implies large scale. At the end of the day, a child there just needs to be one of them to drown. It doesn't. I feel that that's still relevant. It is still relevant. I would ask, can we have both? Is there any reason why we can't use both?
Look, I'm not the decision maker. The planning committee is the decision maker here. You've heard we're going round and round, over the same sorts of issues. I think what I would suggest is that if Adam reads his suggestion, if you're happy with it and someone wants to move that as a motion, great. I would suggest doing that. If you want to add paragraph 102 in that, then that's the committee's will. I'll leave that to you to decide. But if Adam just reads what he's sort of drafted at this stage.
Yeah, so the suggestion is the reason for refusal would be the nature of the proposed use would involve occupation by vulnerable users, and the proposed development is located within close proximity to the River Witham without any secure boundary treatments. These safety concerns would require the implementation of revised boundary treatments which would have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the area, contrary to policy D1 of the local plan and paragraph 135 of the National Planning Policy Framework. Now, for members' reference, paragraph 135 says that planning policies and decisions should ensure that developments will function well and add to the overall quality of the area, not just for the short term, but over the lifetime of the development. And part F of that paragraph says that it should create places that are safe, inclusive and accessible, and which promote health and well-being with a high standard of amenity for existing and future users, and where crime and disorder and the fear of crime do not undermine the quality of life or community cohesion and resilience. So I think the points there that Councillor Morgan's been picking up about the safety of children, that's captured by part F there of that paragraph, and it's probably a better reference just in terms of the actual design and function of the building, as opposed to potentially paragraph 102.
Thank you. To me, that does sound fine, thank you. Councillor Bushnell saying...
Yeah, I just wanted to know what does actual paragraph 108 says, as the assistant planning director said, probably that will be better, stronger.
Sorry, my mistake. 108 relates to greenbelt, so it's not relevant at all. I meant 181.
In your opinion, can be added to it?
So 181 refers back to the points that Phil was mentioning earlier, which is more directly related to the actual access arrangements and safe access. And so it's ultimately a matter for committee in terms of what your actual concerns are. Are your concerns related to the actual safety of the children itself in terms of the occupation, or is it related to the actual, if there is a flood event that occurs, can people get in and out safely of the property? It's two slightly distinct issues.
Thank you for that. So we have, I think that what Adam referred to, was it paragraph 181 that you read out? Sorry. 135, sorry. We've got lost track, which one? Right, so 135 seems to me to be a really good overall catchment paragraph. I'm still reluctant to give up my 102. What I'll do is I'll put it to yourselves. I'll just for a little bit more debate just around fine-tuning this. In that case, the wording. So, Councillor Ellis.
Yeah, with regard to section 102, that clearly relates to public places. It refers explicitly to the public, so I don't think there's any merit in using that as a supporting argument for refusal.
Did you want to say something, Councillor Mills?
No, only that I thought the final sentences of 102 would be a very good lead-in to what we want to say afterwards. Yes, I like what Adam has suggested. I also like what Phil has suggested. I don't know if we can have both. I mean, the whole point is we are trying to stress the children's safety. I think that's what we've got to get to stressing. And are we overdoing it if we add too many in? I'm just a bit worried, you know, if it goes to appeal, what inspectors might be looking at first. I feel 181 addressed the flooding, and the other two, 102 is a good lead-in, a general sentence, and DE1 and 135 just finish it all off with more detail on the other aspects of the boundary treatment issue affecting the character of the area.
I'm happy to accept that. Are other members of the committee minded to accept that? We go for a package in effect, but all focusing around the safety issue. Okay. In that case, do we need to come up with some more wording? Or?
I think, yes, you would need to, whether it's just an amendment to Adam's suggestion by adding some of the paragraph numbers, but we need to be really clear what you are moving, and then that would need to be seconded. Thank you.
Can I just clarify? You know, Patsy, I don't want to be lost. The big space, the big areas, I don't want that to take away from what Adam said. That's the only thing that concerns me. Like you say, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
As I've advised before, you don't need 10 reasons for refusal, you need one good reason for refusal. And sometimes, if anybody's ever sat in a public inquiry, absolutely less is more.
Yeah, I feel less is more, because that is what Adam said. I am concerned that if we start putting all the conditions, then it would affect the character and appearance. And ultimately, it's the river. And hopefully the inspector will either come out or have a look at some photos. But I just feel that if we put too much, he'll start saying, well, that doesn't apply, that doesn't apply, when really we've got it in a nutshell. Well done, Adam.
How do people feel accepting the point about the scale implied in 102, that we incorporate 181 and 135 and DE1? So it's picking up a hybrid of what Phil was proposing and what Adam was proposing. Are we happy to accept that? Does Phil's add? I have to admit, I actually quite like Adam's. I do think it's a really good catch-all, and it also refers to the environment as well. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. I'm going to make an executive decision that we stick to Adam's wording, if that's all right, and in which case Councillor Bushnell saying is that acceptable. So what we'll be putting to the vote then is a proposal to refuse this application based on, would you like to read that again please, Adam? Thank you.
So the reason would be the nature of the proposed use would involve the occupation by vulnerable users, and the proposed development is located within close proximity to the river without any secure boundary treatments. These safety concerns would require the implementation of revised boundary treatments, which would have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the area, contrary to Policy D1 of the Local Plan and paragraph 135 of the National Planning Policy Framework.
Thank you very much for that. We'll need a seconder for that proposal. Councillor Sawyer, beat you to it, Councillor Trotter. Thank you. If I could ask all those who are in agreement with this proposal, please raise your hands. Thank you. All those against? And any abstentions? Thank you. That has been carried. This application has been refused. Thank you. For the reasons provided. I'm just going to now suggest that we have a 5-minute, actually make that 10-minute break. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. The time is now 4 o'clock, and we will now continue with our Planning Committee meeting on the 8th of May. We are now on agenda item either labelled 4B or 5, depending on where you are in the papers, and it's application reference S242191, which is the installation of solar farm with associated equipment and services. I won't go through everything now because our officer will be doing that. This is at land adjacent to Spalding Road in Bourne, Lincolnshire. If you would like to please go ahead, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As you say, this is application S242191, and it's a proposal for the installation of a solar farm with associated battery storage comprising ground-mounted solar photovoltaic panels, including mounting systems, inverters and transformers, electrical substation, underground cabling, stock-proof fencing, CCTV, access tracks and associated infrastructure for a temporary period of 40 years, and it's land adjacent to Spalding Road, Bourne, and the application has been called in by Councillor Zoe Lane, who's cited concerns relating to the impact of the development on the countryside. So the site itself is 34.6 hectares of land to the north of Spalding Road and approximately 3.5 kilometres to the east of Bourne, and consists of 2 fields of arable agricultural land and is bound on all sides by further agricultural land. The site itself contains an existing overhead electrical line which runs north-east to south-west through the site, so you can just see on the screen here the existing 4.6 megawatt solar farm which was granted in 2011, and the gap between the panels that you can see on the OS plan here shows the broad alignment of the overhead power line that then continues through the site. The actual site boundaries itself are broadly undefined. Now, members will remember a committee meeting a couple of months ago where a proposal for solar development on a home farm was considered by committee. That was 1.2 kilometres to the northwest of the current site. That's a 28 megawatt output that was, as I say, approved by committee in March earlier this year. And what you can see on the screen here is the current application site outlined broadly in red, and the home farm scheme that's been approved by committee outlined in green. So the current scheme itself is a solar farm with associated battery storage which has an output capacity of up to 20 megawatts. The panels on this scheme would be non-tracker fixed panels and includes a battery energy storage system located centrally within the site that contains 8 battery units as well as the necessary water tanks. Boundary fencing would be approximately 2 metres in height. Just to note, that's a correction from the officer report which accidentally refers to 2 kilometres in height, which obviously would be substantially different. And the connection to the grid in this case would be via the overhead power line that runs through the site, with the substation facilitating that connection, forming part of the current application. The scheme also includes significant landscaping proposals, so that includes over 5,000 square metres of new hedgerow planting, 32 new boundary trees, and over 27,000 square metres of native wildflower planting and a retained option for grazing as part of the development. In terms of the key issues for the proposal, again it relates to the principle of development, the impact of the proposal on agricultural land and the effect of the proposal on the character and appearance of the area. Committee obviously very well versed in these solar schemes now, so you appreciate that renewable energy development is acceptable in principle by policy RE1. This scheme would include 20 megawatts of output capacity. It does involve development of 16.6 hectares of best and most versatile agricultural land. Just as reference in terms of that quantum of best and most versatile agricultural land, that is less than the schemes that committee have considered and approved at Home Farm and Church Lane at Welby and Pastures Farm in Welby. As I say, the BMV on those sites was all significantly greater than the current application scheme. The officer report goes into quite some detail in terms of the sequential assessment that's been undertaken. In this case, the sequential approach required a much smaller search area than what you would see in a number of other proposals because of the nature of the connection being on-site via the existing overhead lines. And the officer assessment in this case is that the use of BMV has been justified. In terms of the visual impact on the proposal, I'm just going to go through some slides for you now which shows the existing scenario at the top and then the proposed visual impact of the scheme in year 1 and then again in year 5. So the image that you've got on the screen at the top is looking towards the site from Spalding Road. So you can just see on the top the extent of the proposed development from that viewpoint. Second one for year 1, as you can see, relatively limited sort of visual impact. And then in year 5, the main visual impact that you'd actually have is the views of the landscaping scheme as opposed to any view of the operational equipment. Then the next image on the screen here is looking from Bourne Road, so to the north of the site. Again, you can see the extent of the development on that top screen. Year 1, again, you can see the visual impact of those panels, and then year 5, how that visual impact is significantly reduced by the proposed landscaping. And then finally, from the east of the site, so from North Drove, which wraps around, so for this eastern viewpoint, again, we've got an image showing the overall extent of the development at the top, and then these bottom 2 images, as you can see, very limited potential visual impact from that viewpoint. So in terms of the assessment of those landscape impacts, there would be a minor adverse impact in terms of landscape character, just because of the nature of the change of the development. There would also be a moderate adverse impact in terms of those visual images that you've seen on the screen, but the vast majority of those impacts are actually very localised in nature because of the flat topography of the site that you've got. That landscaping scheme would provide some mitigation, but there would still be some element of harm. And then in terms of looking at that potential cumulative impact with the approved solar scheme at Home Farm, there isn't actually any additional impact beyond the impacts caused by the scheme in isolation. The Home Farm, in conjunction with it, doesn't add to the level of harm identified. So there is a minor policy conflict identified from that visual impact. To weigh against that, you've got significant public benefits. So, as I say, makes a clear contribution towards meeting the need for renewable energy. We would attribute that substantial weight as officers. Likewise, you've got quite significant biodiversity net gain in habitat units and watercourse units, as well as creating hedgerow, which is not currently present on site. Again, would give that substantial weight. And then to counterbalance, as I say, is those minor adverse impacts on the landscape character and those visual impacts, which are attributed minor weight, particularly in view of that localised nature of impact. So just bringing that all together in terms of that plan and balance. So our officer assessment that the identified policy conflicts with the development plan would be outweighed by the benefits of the proposal, such that it calls the development plan as a whole, and therefore the recommendation to committee is to authorise the Assistant Director of Planning Growth to grant planning permission subject to conditions set out within your report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that. I believe that we have a speaker, District Ward Councillor Zoe Lane, if you'd like to come forward, please. And you will have 3 minutes to speak and be given a 30-second warning. Thank you. And please don't run away in case we've got questions for you. Thank you. Do want to let us know when you're ready.
I'm good to go. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Fellow councillors, I stand before you once again to plead for our farmland and our fenland landscape. Earlier this year, you approved the application for the Home Farm solar farm on Dyke Drove, which had its merits despite its scale. I'm sorry to say that this application, despite being almost 50 acres smaller, has none of those merits to speak of. The application includes provision for a battery energy storage system on site. These systems are known to be a major fire risk, and the number of guidelines already in place in the technology's infancy attest to that. While evidence suggests there is enough water storage proposed to be on site to deal with this risk and put out any potential fire, we must be absolutely satisfied that the contaminated water will be appropriately disposed of. Current proposals read as if it will be allowed to flow freely into our watercourses. I'm extremely concerned that toxic waste would also seep into the soil, destroying all possibility of it ever returning to agricultural use, let alone in 40 years' time. The watercourse is likely to be affected by the runoff, a part of the land drainage system which helps to alleviate the 1 to 3.3% flood risk that causes so much of our fenland to have its downgraded 3A classification. It is vital to note that there is some land on this site which has been given a Grade 2 classification despite the alleged flood risk. Could we ask for a clear indication that the best use of this land is for harvesting food, not sunlight? By taking BMV land out of agricultural use, the site is proposing to achieve a poultry 130% biodiversity net gain. Quite frankly, this is an insult and a waste of good food-producing land, as I would remind the committee that the last site you saw near this road was achieving an over 800% net gain and had active support from the Wildlife Trust. This site has received no such support. I would lastly observe to the committee that Downing Renewables now own the existing adjacent solar farm, which was granted permission in 2011. The documents relating to the case are no longer available on the SKDC website, but local memory attests that there were conditions in place to have sufficient hedging planted to screen the solar farm. This never happened. It has also never been rectified by the new owners, and there is still no sign of it being so. I would respectfully ask you to refuse this application until such a time that we can be satisfied that it brings any single benefit to the surrounding community in Bourne, Dyke and 20. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have a question? Any questions for Zoe? No? No? Councillor Trotter?
Thanks, Councillor Lane. You spoke about the water runoff. Can you just, where did you get your information from about your concern, obviously, of the contaminated water? Thank you.
It's pretty well documented in other cases of fires. I believe, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, that it is lithium-ion batteries that are used for energy storage. When that catches fire, that causes a waste, and the surface water runoff from this site will be going into our drains. I haven't seen any provision to deal with it if there is a fire, so my understanding and my assumption is that it then soaks into the soil and is treated as surface water runoff.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and that's probably a follow-on question to the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
Thank you. Councillor Lane, do you know that they are lithium-ion batteries, or are they lithium-ion phosphate? Do you know which they are?
I'm not an expert. I believe it was lithium-ion. I don't know. I just remember seeing the lithium-ion bits, but I don't recall whether it said phosphate in the documents as well, or just the first bit.
Thank you. Yeah, I've read the same sort of things you've read about the difficulties of the water runoff trying to put out lithium-ion. So that's why I'm quite interested to find out. Maybe we can ask the applicant whether the lithium-ion or lithium-ion phosphate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis?
Thank you. I can't find it now, but am I correct in saying that it's the Black Sluice who are the drainage board for that area, and they haven't registered any objections, and they would the water runoff go into their sluice, into their drainage system? It possibly is a question for...
It is due to go into the dike at the back, which I believe is in the Black Sluice catchment.
Okay, but they didn't register any objection. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. If I can please call forward our applicant, or speaking on behalf of the applicant, Tony Gannon, who is the head of Downing Renewable Developments. Thank you. And you will have 3 minutes with 30-second warning. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm Tony Gannon, head of Downing Renewable Developments, a renewable energy project developer and operator funded by UK investors. Thank you for your time and consideration of our Limes Farm solar project today. The project, the 20 megawatt solar farm, will generate enough energy to power the equivalent of over 5,000 homes per year, making a significant contribution to meeting the renewable energy targets of both the UK Government and South Kesteven Council. Our site selection process accounted for local grid connection capacity and then a balance of land availability and appropriate environmental and planning considerations. We have a secured grid connection for this project, which is a fundamental barrier to many other potential project locations. Like many farmers, the landowner of Limes Farm has a wider farming business and has experienced many of the challenges the farming sector faces. Given these challenges, it has become increasingly clear that relying solely on a traditional farming approach is no longer sustainable, which is why diversification of the use of some of his farm is not just a choice, but a necessity. Whilst the project is on agricultural land, the majority of the land is classified as Grade 3B, which is not considered best and most versatile, and so meets the requirements of the NPPF. Following installation of the site, the land will continue in agricultural use, being used for ongoing sheep grazing in conjunction with the solar farm. In support of this, Natural England stated in response to our proposals that the project is unlikely to lead to significant permanent loss of BMV agricultural land. Additionally, and as identified in the Officer Recommendation Report, the visual impact of the project is very localised, with mitigation proposed to reduce any impact even further. This included redesigning and reducing the scale of the site in direct response to community and neighbour feedback. This development has been designed with landscape, biodiversity and community in mind. It represents a balanced approach, helping to sustain an ongoing farming business whilst contributing positively to the environment and energy security. We're proposing a significant community benefit package designed to directly reduce the energy bills of those with the greatest need in the nearby area by offering 2 free residential solar installations each year during the lifetime of the project. This means 80 local homes receiving free domestic solar panel installations, in addition to £100,000 being provided to Bourne Town Council to be spent on local projects. You'll be aware that a climate emergency was declared by the UK Government and subsequently by South Kesteven Council. In addition to this, the UK Government has also identified the need to triple solar power by 2030. We would highlight that if all the solar projects currently in the UK planning process were approved,
30 seconds.
then this would still not take us even halfway to this government target. To conclude, and as identified in the Planning Officer's report, the site meets the requirements of the NPPF. The project is aiding a local farmer by allowing his business to continue farming. No land is being lost from food production, and a significant community benefit package has been offered to those with the greatest need. We thank you for your consideration today and respectfully request that the Planning Officer's recommendation for approval is followed. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. So, can you answer my question about the batteries?
So, at the moment, the final composition of the batteries is yet to be determined following a procurement exercise. We've not procured batteries yet because obviously we don't have planning consent yet. But to address the particular point about drainage following a fire, so included within our plan is a water tank to include enough water to extinguish any potential fire, in addition to the other fire measures that we'll have as a result of a fire risk assessment. Any contaminated water, should that occur, will be captured and will not be released directly into the drains. And so under planning condition, we are required to submit a surface water management plan for approval, which will address containment of any water as a result of fire extinguishing.
And then the follow-up, which is coming up quite a lot now and also has just been quite a public thing, the panels, where will you be procuring them from?
So, although we encourage as much local procurement of supply chain, contractors, service providers, as we can, at the moment there's not panels readily available being manufactured in the UK, so they'll be sourced overseas. However, we are proud members of the Solar Stewardship Initiative, which means that we've got an ethical supply chain and there's provenance of the supply chain that we use to ensure that there's no concerns over raw materials or exploitation of workers.
Sorry, that's great. Can you just tell me the name of that again?
The Solar Stewardship Initiative.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Trotter.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just picked up on you saying that no land will be lost for food production. I presume it's because you said that sheep will be grazing on the land.
So the project is temporary in nature, so there's no permanent loss, and no land will be lost from agriculture because sheep grazing will be permitted in the site under licence from the landowner.
Thank you. So that so that's for 40 years, you're saying. So that there will be loss of prime agricultural land for 40 years. I'm just, and it is a question, Madam Chairman. I'm just reading on page 56. It said while the proposed development result in loss of grade 2, which is very good quality agricultural land. So good quality cereals will be lost, and obviously at the moment we've got a drought and cereals and other vegetation are particularly growing. Have you made any approach to any other landowners who've got lower quality land with the potential for panels to be put on land where we wouldn't keep losing the best food for the country? Thank you. And abroad.
So I guess two points in that. One is the majority of the site is not the best and most versatile, although obviously some elements of the site is. As part of our site search process, we undertook a site search along the full length of the overhead line that runs through the site, so that's a 20-kilometre long line. Because there's a lot of best and most versatile land in the area, it was actually very difficult to find suitable areas of non-B&B land with a grid connection that meets the other development constraints that we have in terms of potential visual impact, ecology, etc. So there was no other sites identified that were more suitable than the site that you see before you.
Just finally, Madam Chairman, is there any way, because we've heard lots of solar panel applications, and very often the applicants have, we've come to a compromise, they've avoided the best quality land with panels not being put on it with loss for 40 years. Have you considered doing that? Is there any way that you can avoid that key land that we do need for food production?
So, well, on that particular point, the original agricultural land classification report that we submitted showed the entire possible area of the site, which was around about 76 hectares. We've reduced, and the majority, so more than 50% of that site actually was best and most versatile land. As a result of feedback during consultation processes, dialogue with the planning officer, etc., we've reduced that to around about 34 hectares, with the majority of it not being best and most versatile. So we've actually reduced the potential area by about 50%, and now the balance is tipped in favour of non-best and most versatile land. So we have actively undertaken that. Maybe one final point related to that is, obviously best and most versatile land is very important, but it's not something to be considered in isolation. And we could have moved the site further to the north, which would take slightly more grade 2 land out of the development, but that would bring it closer to the property at the north of the site. And so what we've proposed is a balance that's got suitable separation from the neighbours, which is now over 200 metres away, and uses some best and most versatile, but the majority is not. So it is a very delicate balance, which we think was struck well with this project. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Does anybody, Councillor Bishop, say?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, through you. Could you possibly define temporary, please?
So in the context of this application, it's for a period of 40 years. So it's following 40 years, the project will be decommissioned, the site will be returned to its original condition. The reason we can commit to that in particular is the materials used for a solar farm can, like for instance, the mounting structures which are piled into the ground, they can be pulled out of the ground and recycled. And after 40 years, the site will be returned back to original condition, but with additional biodiversity again.
Don't you feel 40 years is a lifetime? And I've got a secondary question as well. Will it be possible for you to inform us of the provenance of your solar panel?
Oh, sorry, Councillor Bisson asked me. I'll jump in that one because it's probably unfair to ask the applicant to answer that question about temporary period. Committee, you'll be aware we've had this debate many times over the last year or so about the operational period. I understand that committee are not necessarily happy that the fact that 40 years is referred to as a temporary period because it is clearly an extensive period of time. But for planning purposes, the fact that the site can be returned to its previous use at the end of the operational period means in planning terms it is classed as a temporary use. You have conditions in front of you that secure it as a temporary use. Completely hear what you're saying, Councillor Bisnausing, but it's probably not worth us going over the ground again. It is a temporary use, and that is very clear in terms of planning appeal decisions.
My main concern is what will be the condition of the land when it is returned to its former use, because it hasn't been fertilised, it hasn't been resting, That's my big concern. But also a concern due to the recent pronouncements of our MP, or Environment MP, on the provenance of solar panels from China. And I fully agree with that. When are we going to probably really, insist so that we have got sources to cut the carbon footprint of the solar panel, where it's coming from and it's mounting, to be sourced locally?
Sorry, can I just make the point? Unfortunately, that's not the remit of our committee. Unfortunately, at some stage, maybe the government will change its policy. But at the moment, we can't use that. We can't look at the sourcing of totally sympathise with where you're coming from, I have to say.
Could I please respond to that point, just to clarify?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So, as I mentioned, we are, regardless of any government legislation requirements, voluntarily, we have a signatory to the Solar Stewardship Initiative, which means that we are voluntarily checking the provenance of our supply chain, ensuring that there's ethical sourcing of labour and materials, and that includes in China, Korea, etc., where the raw materials come from. So we are voluntarily doing that and can demonstrate the provenance of all our equipment, whether it's panels or whether it's material that's sourced locally.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to ask? Can I, if I can, just picking up a point, actually, to be fair, it was actually our previous speaker raised, and it was around the amount of the net gain, biodiversity net gain. As was previously mentioned, we previously approved an application which had 800%, and mainly what they'd done was they put hedgerow around anywhere you could think of that you could put hedgerow. I noticed that you have got some increase in biodiversity net gain, but I'm just thinking in comparison, it's actually quite low in comparison to the other site, which was also a family farm, and they were looking to diversify their income sources. So can you just clarify, is there potentially any movement on that to increase the net gain, or whether it's something that could be done? Because it just feels
Can I come in on
it
that
might
one
help
for you, Councillor
mitigate
Morgan,
against
sorry.
the other concerns. That's what I'm thinking.
If I just come in on that point firstly, and I'm sure if the applicant wants to add anything further, one of the things probably just to note in terms of almost that comparative exercise that you're doing between the previous scheme is, as you say, a lot of that percentage net gain for the previous schemes came from hedgerow. This scheme has an 18.79 unit increase. It's not possible to quantify that as a percentage increase in this case because there's no existing hedgerow. So you've got to take into account what your starting point for hedgerow on this site is a baseline of 0. 18.79 hedgerow units is a substantial amount and is probably broadly equivalent to what you've actually seen on those other schemes. It's just not defined in terms of percentage because the starting point is 0 here.
Thank you. That is helpful. You mentioned sheep farming. Now, forgive me if I've misheard this, and I don't want to repeat. My understanding is that the site's prone to flooding, or could be prone to flooding. So, does that tie in to rearing sheep on the same land? Are you talking about sheep wandering around and munching underneath the panels, or around the edge of the panels? Or, excuse me, I'm just trying to picture where those sheep will be.
I mean, you're basically correct, but the full site isn't within flood zone 3, and the solar farm has been designed to be compatible with flood zone 3 as well, and that includes grazing. So if, I guess like any farm, if there's areas that flood, the sheep can go elsewhere within the area. So there's areas of flood zone 1, for instance, within the site as well.
Following up again then, because one of the points I noticed was also you're talking about fencing for deer to prevent. Now, would that be raised so that smaller mammals can move around, hedgehogs and badgers or anything else that happens to?
Exactly. So the fencing that we've proposed is a standard agricultural fence. So it's a 2 metre high deer fence, which you would commonly see around farms as well. So that's got large gaps for riparian corridors to go through. So it's the purpose of that fencing is to provide a visual security deterrent while still fitting within the landscape rather than being something more industrial. So it's a common agricultural fence that allows the passage of small mammals, etc.
Are you planning, do forgive me, are you planning to do any meadow flower planting as well on top of the hedgerow planting?
Yes, so within to the north-west of the site there's a large area of biodiversity enhancement that includes wildflower meadow planting. So we've got grassland seeding under the panels and then wildflower meadows within the biodiversity net gain area, which will be fenced off separately to prevent the sheep going in and munching that bit.
And I notice you've got a water course, or it looks like a kind of like a large pond or mini lake as part of your scheme. Is that going to be a natural habitat, or is that more like a reserve or a reservoir or pool on the looking at the plan?
I think you might be looking at an existing reservoir.
Oh, is it outside your boundary? Yeah.
So that's existing.
Oh, apologise. I do apologise. I apologise. Yeah, it is actually. Sorry, it was the way I was reading the plan. Apologies. Forget that.
But just to reiterate, although we've already demonstrated through the application process and with feedback from the Environmental Agency, there's no increased risk of flooding from the site. So we have addressed that. But through condition and prior to construction, we'll be submitting a surface water management plan to ensure that there is actually no risk to nearby watercourses from pollution of any sort from the scheme.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Councillor Ennis.
Thank you. With regard to the wildflower meadow planting grass, will that all be native Lincolnshire seeding that you'll be using?
Yes, so we've included a proposal within our site plans for a biodiversity plan, but we've also included that under condition. I'm pretty sure to have final approval from local stakeholders to ensure that it does match the local environment.
Thank you for that. Is everyone happy whilst? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to be aware that we've gone over our 3 hours, so we need to extend the time. We're currently 4:30, so if I go for the maximum 5:30 one go, but rather hope that we don't go that far. Could I just see if I could have a show of hands for that, please? Thank you. That was agreed. Thank you. So we've heard all of our speakers, so we'll now move on to questions for our officer and debate. Councillor Trotter.
Adam, just looking at page 60, obviously the cumulative of solar farms. I know we've gone through this with all the Welby applications. So is there any constraints on, because we've had, obviously Home Farm went through, it says that Limes Farm has got permission, but operational solar farm granted, but I don't know, is there an actual solar farm on there at the moment? Do you know? Yeah.
So, just to give you context, this down here is the existing operational 4.6 solar farm.
Yeah.
That's actually proposed, and then if we just go back to the screen, that probably shows it better actually. So, what you can see here, that's the existing, that's the proposed site, and then this is Home Farm, which has got permission as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Madam Chairman, just the question. I'm sorry I ask all these questions. Was there much, I've read through the papers, was there much pushback from neighbouring properties at all?
3 objection letters, but nothing of any significant volume. As you say, the Welby ones, we've got quite significantly more here, relatively low compared to some of the other schemes.
Does any council wish to say?
Don't you think we should be given due consideration to best and most versatile land that we'll be losing, agricultural land?
It's in your report, Councillor Biznowski, as a clear material consideration. Our assessment of that potential impact is set out in there. Committee are entitled to make an assessment on that as well.
I think that means yes. I think it is appropriate to consider it.
I agree about losing our main growing land, put solar panel on it that's not going to be productive for 40 years. That's my concern.
Thank you. So, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at it all and looking to all the other bodies that have fed into this, County Council, Fire and Rescue, Wildlife Trust, etc., etc., and realising that cumulative impact doesn't come into it on this, and this is probably one of the lesser contentious ones that we've come across. I'm of a mind to agree to this. There's just one question that maybe you can answer for me, and that is the decommissioning, or the early decommissioning of that. Is there any provision there? Because what worries me with all of these is companies come and go. 40 years might be temporary in the life of a farm, but it's not temporary in the life of a business. So is there any conditions we can put on this, that some funding is put in place to cover decommissioning should, worst case scenario, the company goes bankrupt or something like that, and we're left with a field for 12 months that has no, that isn't drawn on or anything like that? Who then would pay to decommission that? Is there any, is it within our remit to put something on that or not?
You have the planning condition drafted there, Councillor Harrison. The effect of that is that condition runs with the land rather than the actual operator. So, for example, if the proposed operator goes bankrupt, as you say, the land is covered by the land, so whoever then takes that land on, the obligation falls on them.
Or we could put the charge on the land. Well, okay. Well, with all that in mind, I'm of a mind to propose that we accept this.
If I may have a seconder. Thank you. I think Councillor Ellis was first, actually. Thank you. So, does anybody else have any more comments, or Councillor Trotter?
Yeah, I think, like Councillor Harrison says, this is one of the sites that I'm not so concerned about, but I am getting very concerned about losing all this good land, and it just keeps coming. So while I think, as I say, I'm minded to probably approve this particular site, because I do think as well the impact on neighbouring properties is a key, and from what Adam said, there doesn't seem to be a great deal of pushback, but I still feel it just keeps coming, so I'm not happy with it, but I agree I've probably got to go with this one.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Penny?
Sorry, press the right button to help. Yes, just on that point, Adam, we only ever seem to talk, and inspectors only ever seem to talk about that particular application and the quantity of BMV. Are we doing an addition about what is being taken over in this district with each of these applications and the total amount?
There's no formal record, but I do have the details here for you, actually, Councillor Milnes. So this one, as you say, it's 16 hectares of BMV. The Church Farm scheme was 27 hectares of BMV. The Ash Tree Solar Farm at Welby was 0.5 hectares, and then Pastures Farm at Welby was 40 hectares of BMV.
Thank you. That's recently. I'm just wondering, over the last years since solar farms have been coming in, I seem to have remembered quite a few that we've gone through and approved. And what's occurred to me is they seem to be, this is quite a small one, I've got to say. They do generally now seem to be getting much bigger and bigger, and we end up with the NSIPs as well. And it must be quite a volume of land that is being taken over. Anyway, this is quite a small volume on its own, but like Councillor Trotter says, it's very concerning when we're going to start adding up the totals.
If I might just, I will say that I do support this application and will be voting for it. And listening to everyone else's comments, my thoughts around it are that it is a smaller size. Again, we are helping, in effect, a farmer remain sustainable. The farm remains sustainable. So actually, we're protecting the rest of the growth of the crops on that site. Be interesting to see if one day the people come back again and ask us to extend or put another farm on their land. But at the moment, that's not yet been the case. I think it's important I give quite a lot of weight actually to the provision of improved biodiversity, because that is also a huge issue, the loss of biodiversity. So I do put quite a lot of weight on that. And the fact that the only thing I would like to ask, is there a way that we can check or condition, how do we make sure that there are sheep put on? Because we often hear about this. Can we do that? It's a really stupid question, I know, but we get told often there'll be sheep, and then I've never seen any sheep.
You do have a condition there, Councillor Morgan, which is a landscape and ecological management plan. So that deals with the actual management of the site during the operational period. That's where we'd expect, effectively, to, I say, secure that there is sheep grazing on that land as part of the management provision.
Thank you. I imagine all these pet ewes trotting around the fields. I'm delighted because they're not actually the core business. Well, thank you so much. In that case, if I can propose that we go to the vote. So all those in favour, of the proposal to approve this application, subject to the conditions that are before us. And we need a seconder. Sorry, we jumped ahead. Apologies. That time of year. No.
My mistake, Tim.
Oh yes, sorry, Tim did, and Patsy seconded.
Sorry, my mistake.
That's fine. Thank you. All right, in that case, all those in favour of the application, please raise your hand. So that's unanimous. Oh, sorry. One, and any against? I'm against. Apologies. Okay, thank you. One against, and I didn't. Any abstentions? No. No, thank you. So that has been carried. Thank you. Thank you. And today you'll be delighted to know we have no any other business. So that draws the meeting to a close. Thank you. Thank you all for your cooperation.